disappointed in every one of you.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you.
I'm disappointed in every one of you.
I kiss you on the mouth.
No, I'm not cool with that. I'm sorry.
One more time.
I'm disappointed in every one of you.
I mean, I'm dealing with degenerate animals.
I'm disappointed in every one of you. Disappointed in every one of you.
All right, come on.
Honestly, I can't do it no more.
I'm disappointed in every one of you.
Let me tell you why.
It's gonna be all right, Nicky. Go ahead, shoot.
You just killed a fucking man.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, because you got nothing. You don't got a thing. Yeah, because you got nothing. You got nothing.
I want to get out of this rat hole. I want to get online. I need
HBO Boxing.
All right. Welcome everybody to another HBO Boxing podcast, broadcasting to you live from the True North. It's your good friend, Mr. BDA, and I sure am glad. That's right, sure I'm glad that everybody could be on board for this one, fellas. And this one, we got a special episode for you. We're going to be covering about 2 or 3 topics, maybe a little bit more, depending on the time we have. But I really want to get into something as it pertains to the business of boxing, television, televised boxing, broadcasting, because it really does remind me about the place. It wakes me up to the reality of where boxing is right now. And I want to get a couple of your thoughts on whether we can fix boxing or what can we do to improve what appears to be an unfixable situation. All right, so we're going to get into that. Mexico is playing Venezuela at the Super America Cup, as they call it, at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So we're going to be here for about 2 hours, and then we'll cut it loose. But again, I'm going to be opening up the phone lines from the get-go in case anybody wants to call in and give us their thoughts on the whole business side of boxing, how things are going, titles, the whole thing. But I also want to use a series of articles that was put out by Ring Magazine a couple of weeks ago called HBO, The Rise and Fall of Boxing. And it really, like I said, it woke me up to the reality of the business of boxing and where we're at right now. That being said, before we get down to the fun, let's get the business out of the way, fellas. You know the drill. If you want to donate a couple of shekels our way, you're certainly welcome to do so with the Super Chat feature, although it's always better if you join the membership program. That way you get more bang for your buck. You can also join the Patreon for as low as $2 per month. You can fund our enterprise here with the fan-made documentaries that we're going to be making, so stay tuned for that as well. But the most important thing is you continue to like, you subscribe, and you spread that BDA gospel. All right, fellas, you spread nice and wide. Let's give a big shout-out to everybody in the chat. I'm talking about J.A., Ralph Unreal, Night Murph, the Boxing Sicario, the Quags in there. Shout out to the Quags and the Night Murph, and Rapax Trucking Company, who are 3 of the initiated. Skull Kid 25, Hands Flow Boxing Review, Protectorate General, and many more people to come. Quentin Lassiter. And like I said, many more people to come, I'm sure. Fellas, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. All right. Now, hold on. Let me just open up the phone lines real quick here. And see what we are dealing with.
Welcome to Blog Talk Radio.
Oh, sheesh. Forgot to mute it. Okay, so I'm going to read a couple of quotes here from that article there. Let me just see who wants to be in for this one here. I'm ready for a call here. Hold on a second. Okay, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Give me 2 seconds. I'm doing two things at a time here. I'm opening up the phone lines and I'm calling people. Did you already open the phone lines? Yeah, okay. The phone lines will be open in about 10 seconds. All right. So stay tuned for that. What else? I'm going to get recognized in here as well. If I can find them. Oh, all right. Give me 2 seconds here. I'm getting a bit of a problem here trying to get people to... you know what? Trying to get people to come in here. All right, fine. All right, now, like I said, we got Jimmy jumping in. Jimmy, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Oof, hold on, I can barely hear you, man.
Okay, I'll take care of that.
All right. Like I was saying, shout out to everybody in the chat. Hope you guys are having a good evening. And let's get down to it. This is an article in Ring magazine. And it had been posted published in one of their issues. And then subsequently they made it, they posted it for free on their page. And it really gives you an insight about how HBO Boxing came to be and how it ended up falling. Hence the title, The Rise and Fall of Boxing. Now it's interesting because this all took place within the backdrop of the rise of cable TV. Most of you might not remember this, but there was a time where if you wanted to watch television, you only had about 10, 12 channels. Subsequently, they started adding more, but there was a period where you didn't have that many channels. And that's where you had boxing on network TV. And it took a while for boxing to get on network TV. By the time it started getting famous, we're talking the 1970s. Well, not getting famous, but by the 1970s, boxing was no longer the number one sport in the nation. It still was bigger than it is today, but it was no longer what it used to be in the golden generation, which was 30s, 40s, 50s. That's back in the day when boxing was the number one sport, either boxing or horse racing. And then baseball started creeping in, and whatever happened there. But what happened with the rise of cable television is, back in the early 70s, only a handful of people had it. You had to have money to get it. It's not what it is now. And so HBO came into the fray. And as the article here details, they talked to everybody. They talked to Seth Abraham. Remember that name because he was the guy that was pushing or in control of HBO Boxing since the beginning, all the way up to 2000. And it's interesting because his boxing, HBO Boxing, as they say here, it lasted from 1973 all the way to 2018. That's 30-something years of HBO Boxing, right? And it was quality boxing. One interesting little statistic here, what's the word I'm looking for here? Observation that they make in the beginning of the article. It says, HBO Sports tried to produce every World Championship Boxing broadcast with a Super Bowl ambience. Championship Boxing produced spin-offs like the popular and groundbreaking Boxing After Dark series, while HBO Boxing itself evolved to include TVKO, later known as HBO Pay-Per-View. The pay-per-view arm that debuted spectacularly with the 1991 Evander Holyfield-George Foreman heavyweight title bout. So, right off the bat, when they said that every event was like of HBO Championship was sort of like a Super Bowl, it really is true. If you go back to watch, and you don't even have to go that far into the 70s or 80s, just go to 1990, when Chavez and Mildred Taylor fought, two undefeated guys fighting for all the marbles at 140. If you look at the pageantry before the show, the pomp and circumstance, it was really, they had their tuxedos on, they had interesting video packages, not the same rehash stuff that they have now. They were talking to multiple analysts. They really built it up as if it was a big fight. I see we got Jimmy here. Jimmy, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you for being on, man. I'm just going to read a couple of, because there was a series of three-part series, fantastic articles on Ring TV that they made available called The Rise and Fall of HBO. And I think it's quite pertinent that we talk about this right now because it reminded me of where boxing is right now. The landscape has changed so much in terms of the broadcasting side of boxing, and as well as the quality, dare I say. It just reminded me of the days of HBO. So like I was saying here in the beginning of the article, they talk about how they really tried to make every world championship boxing event, meaning non-pay-per-view, into a sort of huge event that we have now with pay-per-views. Well, what did you make of HBO World Championship Boxing? Like, what were your memories of the quality of the bouts as compared to today?
Well, it was the pinnacle of boxing. I mean, you knew you made it if you got on HBO. It was that type of thing, you know. Promoters would always, like guys who would try to sign you, managers would be like, I have an inroad to HBO. Because if you got yourself on HBO and you did good, they'd have your back, you know. And it was that way for a long time. And I vividly remember those, like the pay-per-view you were talking about. Of course it was. Back in the day, you couldn't even wear, like, they would actually turn you away. They didn't want you dressed like a bum ringside. You literally had to, you literally had to dress up, you know. It was used to be a thing to be seen. Like, you even seen that movie with Denzel Washington when he shows up. He has that long fur coat and he later burns because the cops saw him. But that was the thing. You wore your best clothes. Like, it was an event. The big fights, you know, brought out the big people, and but 100% right. And it's a shame that does it go? I haven't read that article. Does it say who is the driving force behind getting rid of boxing?
Well, because what they're doing is it's what's called an oral history type article, which means that there's very little actual prose in there. As much what they do is they quote a lot of people, and they build a story off the quote. So they're interviewing. And by the way, Joe Santoloquito, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Longtime Ring Magazine writer. He's the one that penned this, put it together. And just to remind people, so there's a couple of names that you have to keep in mind here that are going to keep coming up. Seth Abraham, who was the leader of HBO Boxing between 73 and 2000. Lou DiBella, who is the matchmaker, you got to remember him. He's a promoter now, but he used to be in the golden era of HBO Boxing. Ross Greenberg, and then of course they talked to Bob Arum and Thomas Hauser, who did have a stint with HBO near the end there. But Jimmy, in regards to cable TV, you're older than I am, so maybe you could illustrate it better. But when cable TV was around in the mid 70s to 80s, who were the type of people that had cable television?
Well, when it first came out, it was weird. For the first like half a decade, it was only available on major cities. I mean, like if you lived out in the country or certain parts, they didn't even get it out there yet because you had to literally run a cable. It was all about running cables. There was no satellites.
Right.
So for years and years, it was only major metropolitan cities that even had HBO. So, even then it was, kind of, it didn't really matter socioeconomic as long as you had availability of cable.
Mm-hmm.
But that was what the hard part. So I remember we were like on the list. We would have, to get it when they first started laying the cable for it and shit. But so I think our household got it in 1977, but it was out for at least 5 years prior to that.
And how did the program differ from what was on regular television at the time?
Well, without the commercials, they were able to, and I don't know, it was like you said, it's more pomp and circumstances. They really put a lot into the production of it. It was just everything. If it was on Saturday night, they had fights too. Sometimes they'd have them during the week, like off the, fights that they wouldn't want. So they even had fights that it wasn't always just Saturday night. Saturday nights were the big fights, but they would have minor fights. HBO, they used to have like a fight after dark type thing.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because in the article here, it talks about the genesis of HBO Boxing. For example, Seth Abraham says his titles, he used to work in baseball, I think, as some sort of executive for baseball league. Then he says once he went to HBO, his titles started changing. And the first thing that HBO ever put out was a movie starring Paul Newman called Sometimes a Great Notion. Because again, HBO, they were really, for a while, they were trying to build themselves up as a movie channel a channel that would get the movies before network TV started airing them. Then he says the second program on HBO was on November 8, 1972, which was a New York Rangers versus Vancouver Canucks hockey game. Then the very first fight was Joe Frazier versus George Foreman, which was transmitted by HBO on closed circuit, but it was a rebroadcast. It wasn't a live version. So he calls that the dark ages of HBO Boxing. This was before HBO Sports even existed as a subdivision of HBO. He reminds people that there was no ESPN then, there was no Showtime, there was no Fox Sports, and no Fox News Network either. So, or even a Fox network to begin with. He says so that what HBO Sports was, he said, was a collection of very disconnected, disjointed sports programming. It had no theme, it had no motif, it had no North Star. So it's interesting how it started out as a, hey, let's just see what happens. Let's see what sticks. Then he says that they couldn't, once they started looking out for sports programming, they couldn't buy NFL, NHL, or MLB. Those were leagues that were too big and they would have to compete with the networks for that. So they started looking into individual sports, such as gymnastics, figure skating, and that's when they got into boxing. And it's interesting what he says about his team that he built. He says, I had to stay out of their way. It was a legion of talented people running HBO Boxing. I also quickly realized the impact that pay-per-view attractions would be around 1988. We realized that if we did not get into the pay-per-view business, we would lose big fights and be left with B and C level fights. We created TVKO to get the big fights and protect the mothership, which was championship boxing. So Jimmy, it's interesting that he mentions that it was really about the talented people that he had working for him, and that he stayed out of their ways because he realized he wasn't really that much of a boxing guy, but that he needed people who understood the business under him. That's something that it seems to me appears to be lacking in some of the networks nowadays with DAZN, ESPN.
Oh, exactly. Well, what they do is, I said it was just, I think, the last show we were on, I was talking about the difference. When you have 100 different cameras, right, but you have a producer in a truck who doesn't know anything about boxing, and they're showing most of the match from the waist up. They have those real in close, like, but the best boxing guys notice you want to see the whole fighter, in the shot. You don't always want it, close from just a waist up, because you don't really get appreciation of what's going on if you truly know the sport. You know what I mean? Their feet is every bit as important. What their feet is doing is every bit important what their upper body's doing. But if you got some 28-year-old producer who just, it's all about camera, in the truck running it, but isn't a boxing guy, it's terrible. So it's so true, man. You got to have someone who knows the sport. And just like you said, that guy Greenbaum, I think you said his name was?
Greenberg.
Yeah, Greenberg. Yeah, he was huge, but he was a big. But that's what they did. They got a lot of guys, from that era, and new boxing, and just any good corporation, man. You pick the best people and you trust them. You don't micromanage. Doesn't usually work out, because then people are afraid to make choices and decisions.
Absolutely, so, well said.
Yeah.
And by the way, Chris K in the chat says, Power Slap will replace boxing and MMA. Hashtag Haney 31 and 0. All right, shout out to Chris K for his contribution. No, but Jimmy, you're right, man. I think when it comes to these weird ass angles from DAZN, I think they're trying to innovate. Because we're going to get into that in the article. They mention about the innovation of production tactics. So I think they're trying to come up with new things just for the sake of it. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Just because something's new doesn't make it better. So they should really tone that down. Some of this, the zone has the worst angles. Hopefully they don't, that doesn't come into play this Saturday in the Jesse Bam Rodriguez fight. But it's interesting because in the article too, Santo Luquido calls HBO Boxing the Roman Empire of boxing at the time. And Bob Arum chimes in the article, and he agrees that HBO was the Roman Empire of boxing, but he says that it all depended on who the Caesar was. And at that time, Seth Abraham, between 1973 and 2000, he was the Caesar. And Bud, like he said, he stayed away from his executives. He let them do their thing, whereas he really tried to manage some of the upper-ups, higher-ups in the HBO organization. HBO says that he's the one that brought Hagler over for a 3-fight deal that was paying more than what the networks were willing to spend. So that was one of the big moves that they keep mentioning in the article. Then comes in Lou DiBella, who presently is a promoter, but used to be the matchmaker for HBO, and a lot of people credit him for being one of the reasons why HBO Boxing became the success that it was. And he says, I was very smart, very ambitious. He says, I was with some very smart and ambitious effing people at HBO. See, again, classic Lou DiBella. He just has to swear. He says, and we're all young. Mark Taffet was in HBO's financial area and eventually worked for me. Ross Greenberg was great, and he had great people working for him. He was winning all sorts of Emmys. We were doing numbers like The Sopranos and Sex and the City. So HBO Boxing was doing very well in the ratings, especially considering since HBO was a premium cable channel. So they didn't really rely on advertising. It was about the subscriptions for them. DiBella that says he's the one responsible for bringing attention to the lower weight divisions with Boxing After Dark, which is when they start focusing on lesser known boxers, especially boxers from the lower weight divisions like Barrera and Morales. Now, I do have to credit HBO, though, that near the end, in the last 5 years of their tenure, they did try to keep up that innovation when they introduced the Super Flyweight series. When they had Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, Estrada, Brian Viloria, they really did try to showcase a different side of boxing. But by then, it was just, the heartbeat was almost done for the HBO organization. Nothing was going to save it, as we're going to see later on. Ross Greenberg then says, Michael Fuchs, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Fuchs, who used to be one of the big guys over at HBO, saw that there was an opening because the networks were getting out of boxing. I guess that was because the networks were having trouble selling advertising, and advertisers were buying rounds 2 through 15. Boxing was not conducive to selling ads, he says, because you never knew if a fight would end in one round. Okay, so that was one of the big problems for network TV going into the late 70s, is that the advertising money was drying up. Because, again, it wasn't really profitable. What if the fight ends within 5 rounds? You know, that's 7 rounds, or back in those days, it was 15 rounds. So that's 10 rounds you lose of advertising time. So they started becoming very dubious of, hey, why are we supporting this sport? Boxing was not conducive to selling ads because you never knew when the fight would end in one round. That was a huge problem, he says, and price tags were getting pretty big. Michael saw the opening. HBO couldn't compete with the networks when it came to the NFL, NBA, and MLB, but we could grab prize fighters for much less dollars. Then comes Thomas Hauser, who is a writer. And he says HBO Boxing became great for several reasons. First, it had the support of senior management, which started with Michael, and it continued with Jeff Bukis. They were sport fans, and they wholeheartedly supported HBO Sports and HBO Boxing with their checkbook. It's the checkbook Seth Abraham had that allowed him to build something great. He had the full support of senior management and a huge, huge budget. And then he says, second, you had 2 people at the top of HBO Sports, Seth Abraham and Lou DiBella, who were committed to the boxing program and understood it. Seth understood boxing. He understood the sport and the business. But he said to me, I became a much better boss when I came to understand and accept the fact that Lou DiBella knew more about boxing than I did. Not necessarily the business of boxing, but the sport of boxing. They worked perfectly together. They were committed to making the best fights they possibly could for HBO. Lou had HBO's checkbook and his passion and understanding, but he also had Seth's guidance. And really, Jimmy, that says it all right there. The first thing that came to my mind when they're talking about money in the checkbook is, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have people who understand the sport, it's all going to go awry. And case in point, Waddle and Reed, right?
Exactly. $555 million, and they're still trying to get their money back. Still suing them. But yeah, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't know boxing, you know, I mean, again, he did such a horrible job. It's hard for me to believe wasn't done on purpose, because it was so obvious what he was doing was wrong. It was almost like, well, again, I think he just intended on, you know, putting everybody out of business, and he thought if he controlled all the time slots, everybody would have to go to him, and he'd get rid of all the sanction bodies, and he'd run every bit of it.
But that's But that's interesting, because really looking at as we're reading these quotes here from the rise and fall of HBO Boxing, It reminds me of, we're nearing the end. First of all, we just saw the end of Showtime Boxing late last year. And we're seeing the end of PBC. It's about to be near. Nobody can put a definitive date on it. But look, you compare it to where it was 3 years ago. You can tell it's dying. So the other thing about that, the Waddle Reed thing is, why didn't Al Heyman, because you're seeing it with Saudi Arabia. They came in with a super, huge checkbook, and right off the bat, they're giving us the fights that we want to see. Whereas the PBC, their first card was Keith Thurman versus Robert Guerrero. It wasn't exactly the fight everybody wanted to see. It took them about a year and a half to finally put Keith Thurman in there with Sean Porter. My question is, why didn't they come out with the big guns right off the bat? Make an impression.
Well, yeah, their first big welterweight fight actually was, if I remember correctly, was Danny Garcia versus Keith Thurman. That was in the summer of 2017 or early fall.
But
so that would make it over 2 years, right?
But Porter and Thurman fought in 2016. Unless you're saying Garcia versus...
Okay.
But then again...
If that happened first, that would have been the first big one then.
But you have a good point, though, too, because Garcia was the undefeated guy when he fought Thurman. That was a battle of undefeated. So, they could have made that fight right off the bat as well. Two undefeated guys, two of the best welterweights, but they didn't. They put Thurman in there with Robert Guerrero.
And I think Danny Garcia's father said it best when they were talking about, he's like, why would I fight, and even though it was his son, he would use why would I fight, him when I get the same money to fight a Salka?
Right. So Glacier.
Glacier. Yeah, Glacier put a thing, just talk about that. How people are like, oh, I thought you said they're going out of business. And his tweets, it was one of those long paragraph tweets. He's like, and they're not. I mean, they came out in 2015, free boxing for all. Now everything is behind a pay-per-view wall, and there's only been 3 fights 6 months into the calendar year with nothing on the docket coming forward. And there's supposedly, too, by the way, right now, I should add that he said that he's found out that the PBC fighters have actually hired lawyers to try to do some, and go into the books to find money, because I guess
forensics.
People aren't getting paid. Yeah, forensic guy accounting to find out the money, because they don't know where the money is. And the thing is, nobody can still get a hold of Al Heyman.
Jeez Louise, that's gotta be. It's bad enough that he ruined the careers of some of these guys, or maybe ruined is too strong a word, but certainly stifled some of these guys' career. Now he took away their money potentially. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think it's going to be at the end. It's going to be like, oh, I made bad investments. Sorry, get in line and sue me. I think you're going to see a lot of guys seriously just lose all their money and be like, oh well, yep. You see in your contract that I was paying you guys stipends, but I had the liberty to invest your money. You gave me the okay, and unfortunately, I can't control the markets. Sorry, your life of blood and sweat and tears is gone. Something's going on. The fact that he's not even responding to requests of people who would normally be able to get him on the phone. I don't know, man.
Wow, that's crazy, man. And you know what? It's not that.
It's a rudderless ship over there right now.
It's a what?
A rudderless ship.
Oh, I mean, that's the way it looks like.
People are like, what? Yeah, what's really left of the PBC? Really, if you get right down to it, they only have a handful of fighters. Handful of champions. They haven't signed any new talent. Definitely no young new talent in God knows how long. I mean, it's just it's a shell of what it used to be.
The promoter Butch Lewis did something similar to Michael Spinks. He was in charge of all of Michael's finances, and Michael trusted him. And by the time Butch Lewis died, he realized that he'd spent most of his money. He was giving him a stipend, I believe. but the bulk of it he was spending it on himself. And by the time Michael tried to really look into it, the money was gone. So it's not that unbelievable that maybe Heyman did something similar. I mean, we'll have to see. Hopefully not, man. I hope these fighters didn't get financially ruined, because that is a pain in the butt for these guys. Shout out to Chris K, by the way, for his contribution with the super chat. He says, anyone else love ringside angle with no commentary? I would like that. Or I would just like a feature where you can take out the commentary. Because not for nothing, man, and we're going to get into that. They mentioned that in the article. But as it pertains to today's commentary, there's few commentators out there that I care to listen to. That's just a fact. I mean,
just ring noise, just the crowd noise would be great. Hey, I got to mute for 1 minute. I got somebody knocking on my front door. I'll get rid of them.
All right, no problem, man. And yeah, man. I mean, listen. Not for nothing, but I get better commentary from the panelists here. That's the commentary I'd like to hear. Some of these dudes, they don't really do it well. Shout out to Rampax Drunken Company, by the way, for his contribution with the super chat. He says, "War Estrada. If Estrada wins, he will test dirty." Well, you never know nowadays. Some of these tests, there's a lot of people raising concerns about how some of the testing might be, what's the word I'm looking for here, biased towards certain fighters of certain promotions. So that's something that people should watch out for. Shout out to Rapax Drunken Company and Chris K, and shout out to Alex L for his contribution with the super chat. He says, why is Crawford so hyped with such a subpar resume? Well, it's a subpar resume compared to some of the praise that's been heaped on him. I do believe he proved himself against Errol Spence. There's no doubt about it. But I asked a question the other day is, how many people would have picked Crawford to beat Canelo had that fight been presented prior to the Errol Spence fight? In other words, in 2022 or 2022. 2021 or 2022. Because a lot of people are picking Crawford over Canelo because of what Crawford did to Spence, but they're two different fighters. Errol Spence, and people are going to say, oh, you're making excuses. Guess what? We pointed that out, that Errol Spence wasn't the same guy that he was before. So we're not exactly telling you anything new here that we didn't tell you before the fight. But anyway, that's besides the point. Shout out to those guys for their contribution with the super chat. The other interesting thing about this article that they mention is that the biggest fights were on pay-per-view, but they also had a lot of great fights on regular HBO. Look, and then who is it? Okay, this is Thomas Hauser who says, look at what you have today on pay-per-view that in the past would have been on regular HBO. Most of the pay-per-view fights on HBO were very special. The Seth Abraham Lou DiBella era was the height of HBO Boxing. They worked together quite well, and Seth let Lou be Lou. Lou would come into the office at 2 in the afternoon and be there until 10 at night. Those aren't regular corporate hours. Lou left HBO in May 2000, and Seth left shortly after that. So that's the genesis of HBO Boxing. They had people who actually knew what they were doing. Before we continue on that, again, we're reading passages from The Rise and Fall of HBO, which is a 3-part series article expose by Joe Santoloquido on Ring TV. But we got a phone call here. The phone lines are open in case anybody wants to call in. And let's see who's on the line here. 858, you're on the air. 858, what's on your mind?
Hi, what's the topic? It's the death of boxing. Is that what it is?
Well, I'm sort of framing that in regards to the rise and fall of HBO, because HBO was a monolithic institution when it came to boxing, and it fell. And then Showtime Boxing fell as well. So I'm sort of taking that and piggybacking off of HBO Boxing and asking people, is boxing dying? Is it on its way out?
Yeah, I think so many things play a factor into the change and why HBO left and why Showtime left. Like, you can go into each one of them and then just dissect all of them, but I wouldn't listen to anything that Rick Glacier says, and I've known or had interactions with Rick for so many years, like it goes back like 10 years of him bullshitting with his predictions and his analogies about like Errol Spence and El Heyman and different people in a whole kaleidoscope of his view of the PBC, which he definitely has an agenda against. So anything that he says is going to be biased. Now, are there things wrong with the PBC? Yes. Yeah, there's things wrong with it. But on one end, El Heyman being the advisor, which they tried to sue him, Bobby, Bob and Oscar tried to sue him because they saw him as the promoter, which in court it came out that he was an advisor, and so therefore he had no, they couldn't get him because he was an advisor. So every single boxer is their own promoter in the PBC banner, and then everyone has a manager that basically deals with Al Heyman and the finances and this and that. So if anybody wants to talk, at the end of the day, when you want to like blame anyone for someone's finances or look at people's pockets, you should start looking, and you just said it, look at the manager, because the manager is usually the one that either like screws the boxer out of something, and then they're the ones that make the deal. Like, and even Oscar would say, well, talk to your manager, because he's the one that put you in the situation with Tank and why you took the low, the weight and whatever, you took the low end of the stick when he was referring to Ryan. Like, talk to Lupe. Talk to your manager. Anyway, so this is, I'm kind of going all over the place, but take whatever Rick Glacier says with a grain of salt, truly, because he really, truly does have, he has an agenda.
All right, now hold on. Jimmy wants to say something in regards to that. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say real quick, Lou Heyman, yes, the case with Golden Boy was thrown out, but one of the reasons why Al Heyman hates Bob Arum and for years refused to work with him, he had to pay Bob Arum an undisclosed amount of money, and it was, from what all reports, significant amount of money. So that case with Bob wasn't the same as Oscar's. He actually had to pay Bob Arum. They outside of court. So you know what I mean. One of those, they agreed to drop the things if I pay you money. So Arum did have to pay Bob Arum. Heyman.
So the thing about like why remember the Cold War that everybody was talking about? A lot of this all stemmed from Floyd. Like, remember, like, take the test, that he was making everyone take the test, and he used a lot of, it was Floyd that basically, like, caused this divide between promoters, because if you talk to Bob, if you talk to Oscar, even Al Heyman, like, they all work together. Everyone's working together, even Eddie Hearn or whoever, and they use, like, low-level promoters, too. Like, I live in San Diego. I've seen one of the Watts brothers bring in a couple of like entry or lower prospects into there was like a card that we had over here. I don't remember the promoter, but anyway, to make a long story short, like they will move their fighters around, and when it comes to like these top tier fighters, like say an Errol Spence or a Floyd, then that becomes different. Then it's really on the fighter itself. So it's not that maybe Floyd has a contract with Showtime, which he did, and he can't fight anybody outside this banner or this scope, or he wants to control her, or he was ducking Manny. Like many reasons why Floyd didn't fight certain people, because he was keeping it in-house for whatever his agenda was. And it really, back then, that Cold War, a lot of it had to do with Floyd. And if you look back, his name is like behind all of that, like not fighting certain people. You had Wilder fight Tyson Fury. That was a co-promotion. And it wasn't until, what's his name? Bob contacted Les Moonves. Once he contacted him, and he was able to make that fight between Manny and Floyd, which, that fight should have happened a long time ago, but that happened because Bob Arum made some calls, and Les Moonves had to get involved to make that fight happen. And I think it was because financially it satisfied what Floyd wanted at the end of the day, and right. They cut Oscar out of that deal, and then it's just everything went mostly towards Floyd's side.
That was a mega fight that necessitated so many people coming together because there was so much money to make. But I mean, Al Heyman is right. One of this dude. I mean, when I read here about what HBO was able to do and how they managed to become an institution and the home of boxing, Al Heyman had a lot of money to do whatever he wanted, and he faltered, he floundered, he ran his organization into the ground. So he certainly made a lot of money, but to the detriment of a lot of his boxers, and we're starting to see the results now. So listen, we got to move on here, but thank you for your call, and call back next time.
Yep.
All right, take it easy out there. Thank you. Yeah, we got to get to here. I didn't expect people to call in so early, but hey, I'm happy. Why not, man? Let's go to another phone call. Let's go to 410. 410, you're in the air. 410, what's on your mind?
Yeah, what's up, guys? She was a good caller. She had some good points. I would say, though, Manny and Floyd, the reason it took 5 years to make that fight is because they were making so much money fighting everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Manny Pacquiao and Bob Arum, I mean, they had him fight Tim Bradley 3 times. He fought Marquez, 3 or 4 times. They were cashing big checks. They knew that when they were ready to make that fight, it was going to be as big as what it was. And Manny had gotten knocked out by Marquez in the interim. But they knew. And so it's business as usual. Bob Arum, Floyd, both. I mean, they knew. They had plenty of paydays to cash in the interim. That's just how it is. Is boxing dead in the United States? Man, I don't know if you've been paying attention, bro, about for the last 20 years. Yeah. It's horrible here, man. All the foreign markets are fucking better than ours. I never thought I'd see it. I never thought I'd see where England and their market would be bigger and better and more loyal. American boxing fans, I don't know if it's, Floyd Mayweather probably had something to do with it, of course. Roy Jones to a lesser, they think fighters, if you lose, they just give up on you. That's it. You suck. Come on, man. You don't see this in other places. They don't just give up. It didn't used to be like that here. When Tommy Hearns lost to Ray Leonard the first fight, Tommy Hearns' popularity increased. His fans doubled down on him. They were loyal to him. Nowadays, if you even get knocked down, it's you got a weak chin, you suck. The fans are fucking just bullshit. Add to the fact that here in the United States, we got a lot of other sports. I mean, we just do. We got football and basketball and baseball, of course, and hockey. I mean, a lot of these other countries, they don't have a whole lot of big sports. Boxing is like a little bit more up front there. But, yeah, it's a shame, man. It's a shame what American boxing is nowadays, if you ask me.
Yeah,
I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, it's the American. I mean, at least in the last, you said the last 20 years, but at least in the last 15, we had Floyd Mayweather Jr. here on this side of the Atlantic. But now, Canelo's on this side of the Atlantic, but he's not American. It's Canelo and AJ, and those guys are in their 30s. So we better come up with another star, man, because right now it's looking iffy. It's looking very iffy.
Yeah, I mean, well, Floyd, and I'm a Floyd Mayweather fan. I'm not a guy that's going to tell you he didn't fight who he needed to fight. As far as I'm concerned, he fought everybody he needed to fight. I'm a Floyd Mayweather fan, but what worked out for him really good didn't really work out for the welfare of boxing. Mm-hmm. It just didn't. It actually, it was hurtful, and maybe more than what people think, myself included. I don't know, I mean, the proliferation of all the other sports, that's big, and that can't be undermined. But boxing has also shot itself in the foot, and the fans, the biggest part, I don't think the fighters have changed that much. Fighters are fighters. They're a different breed. The fans have changed here. They're not loyal. Fucking guy gets a loss, or even if he gets knocked down, they fucking just want to put him in the trash can. And that's why we don't have any stars here. You see what I mean? That's why Canelo, he's the only guy. Fucking Tank Davis really ain't that. Listen, when Tank Davis fought Ryan Garcia, they was quick to come out with the pay-per-view numbers because it did well. All of his other pay-per-views is like pulling fucking teeth to find out what they sold because they didn't sell. Yeah, he might get a decent live crowd, but he's not selling like this. There's no stars here. That's no knock on Tank Davis or Bud Crawford or any of the rest of them. It's a knock on the popularity of boxing in the United States is at a critical all-time low. And if it wasn't for this Sheik, an unlikely savior, I don't know, man. It might be gone in a couple years because HBO and Showtime getting out, that should tell you something.
Right, and as we're going to keep seeing with this article here, it's one of the reasons why these guys aren't what they are, these boxers, is because they're not fighting enough. They're not fighting the best. So that's one huge problem right there. All right, listen, Jerry, man, I gotta go to another phone call here, but thank you for your
call. All right, but hold on. Let me say this in response to that. I don't think it's the fighters that are the result of that, and they unfairly get the blame. They don't make the fights. They don't finance the fights. These guys would likely like to fight a couple, 2-3 times a year because you got to remember, man, that's how they get their money. You know what I mean? They're fighting for money, and that's how they get it. They probably would want to fight more, all of them, but they can't fight. The promoters have to finance and make the fights. Where a lot of people are blaming the fighters, but it's not up to them. They can't just fucking just up and, hey, I'm going to fight this guy. It doesn't work like that. Anyway, thanks, bro.
All right, thank you, Jerry. Thank you for your call. Yeah, I was just gonna say about in regards to, I mean, I was referring to guys like Shakur Stevenson, who gets offered a 3-fight deal by HBO for $3 million per fight, I believe, and he turns it down because he thinks he's a superstar. I mean, come on, but Jerry does make a good point that sometimes like this guy wants to fight that guy, and well, how are we gonna make the fight because the other promoter doesn't want it? So, what do you want me to do? You want me to force the other guy to fight?
Comes down to cash demands too. You're 100% right. A lot of these fighters are pricing themselves out. These guys don't want to take pay cuts. James Toney would take fights. He'd fight on HBO for big money. Then he'd take an off. Wouldn't even be on a television fight for $10,000 to stay active. These guys don't want to take pay cuts. We just saw it with Sandow Martin and Haney. Haney just gave up his belt because he didn't want to fight in the Sandow Martin fight because he didn't feel he was going to make enough money.
Exactly.
Who does that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying.
If you remember, Floyd turned down a $12 million contract for 6 fights, which is the same contract Roy Jones got after he beat James Toney. He called it a slave contract. And then when they signed him to something higher, when we wanted fights with Juan Lozano and can't remember, Stevie Johnston and guys like that, they couldn't be made because those guys couldn't afford to pay them what they wanted because Floyd wouldn't take the pay cut. He was getting $2.5 to $3 million a fight, and those fights weren't pay-per-view worthy, so they weren't enough for those guys to get $1.5 to $2 million a fight also, and that's why those fights didn't happen.
Yeah, that's a good point right there as well. Let me go to another phone call here, and then I got to get back to this article, which is pertinent to what is going on with boxing right now. 917, you're on the air. 917, what's on your mind?
Hey, what's going on, BDA, Jimmy, and Chief? It's David.
Oh, David, what's up, man? From New York?
Yeah,
it's
man.
been a while, man. I don't think I've heard
on.
you. I don't think you've called in a while. What's up, man?
What's up, Dave?
Yeah, man, busy. It's good that I'm back being able to speak again. So I would like to address the question of the day. And the way I feel is that I actually think that boxing is more alive and popular than ever. Now, it depends on what you guys' definition of the word dead. What does dead mean? I mean, I want to talk about it from a cultural perspective. I think boxing as a cultural force, especially on the algorithm, is more alive and popping than ever. Now, I have a question for you guys. Do you guys think boxing is dead?
I think, again, like you said, we have to characterize it by what are we talking about. If we're talking about the presence of some of these guys, yeah, like you said, they're doing well in the internet presence, but most of these guys, if you parade them in the street, I don't think 90% of the people know who they are. And on top of that, it's reflected by the fact that none of these people are buying the pay-per-views. So in that sense, at least in the West, yeah, boxing's in a little bit of trouble.
I wouldn't say dead here in the United States, but it's definitely on life support in the States, but not worldwide.
Now,
and I'm only going by what it used to be like here in the States, how big it was.
Okay, I can hear that. Another question. So most of the fans who get exposed, new fans and current watchers of the sport, where are they watching the sport? Are they watching on TV live, or are they watching YouTube highlights? Are they watching YouTube shorts? Are they watching TikTok shorts?
That's a great point because, and Thunderdome, shout out to Thunderdome, who I saw him in the chat. I think a while back he said that most of these guys, what they do, they're casual boxing fans, but what they're doing is they're playing video games, they're doing something else, and then during a break, they'll grab their phone, they'll scan Twitter, they'll watch a couple of highlights of a boxer, and that's it. So they're familiar with the boxers, but they're not actually watching the fights live when it counts.
Do you think there exists the casual to hardcore boxing fan pipeline?
Absolutely. There's a huge potential with the internet. Huge.
Okay. So in my age group, I'm in my 20s, okay? I started watching boxing because of social media. When Instagram first came out, I got exposed to the sport. And on my algorithm, because they know, they advertise by age group, and they know what appeals to what, right? So I have Snapchat, I have Instagram, I have Twitter, and the boxing stuff, it's all over the place, at least on my algorithm. And you have people like Ryan Garcia, right? Ryan Garcia, he is huge with my demographic, which is like the next generation and future fan base. So I think that the future of the sport relies on you need new viewers. And social media, this cultural force of boxing, is constantly gaining new fans. So I think that as a cultural force, boxing is not dead because there's always going to be a human craving for combat sport, right? So something needs to fill that void. Now, in terms of combat sports, the only competitor to our sport is UFC. Do you guys think UFC is more popular than boxing?
You know what? It seems
amongst younger kids, yes.
Yeah, it seems like amongst the youth, among your age group, which is what really advertisers are gunning for. They're always gunning for about, the 17 to 35-year-old demographic or thereabouts. It does appear like UFC, let's call it instead of calling it MMA, let's just call it the UFC because it is what it is. It does appear. Oh shit! Am I disconnected? Can you guys still hear me?
No, I can hear you.
Oh,
I hear you.
I hear you. Sorry. Yeah, so it does. To answer your question, David, it does seem like UFC is right in there, and sometimes UFC manages to beat boxing on one night, and then there's other nights where boxing can still pull it together and rival it. But I also wanted to point out something out though, because we got to go soon. But I think also you have to keep in mind your age, because you're what? You're 27, you said, or 25?
I won't dox myself, around that range.
Okay,
yes.
around that range, yeah. So I don't know if you were around the golden era of HBO Boxing. I don't think you were. So always compared to where we're at now, with where we used to be back in, say, 1999. Yes, back then there wasn't social media the way there is now. So you are correct though that there is a certain presence that was missing back in those days amongst the youth. But like I said, these guys, they look at the name Ryan Garcia, they know who he is, but they're not buying his fights. And that's what really matters at the end of the day. Boxing consumers, not just necessarily viewers.
Cable is dead. Satellite TV is dead. Everybody is watching on the phone now. So I think all these programming that only comes on TV, it's not just boxing on TV is dead. Everything else on TV is also dead. So I think social media is replaced these tablets, these illegal online streaming is going to take away view from the metrics of TV. But traditional TV programming is dead.
Absolutely, yeah, it definitely is. That's why people are cutting the cord day in and day out.
And boxing's only... No.
Go ahead, Jimmy. Go ahead.
Now, I was going to say real quick, I was going to add too, the illegal streaming cannot be underestimated. How many people are team stream, you know what I mean? And it's becoming so easy. You know what I mean? To just steal it. And the piracy is out of control. It always was. The black boxes were the first, which I'll admit I was a member of the black box team.
Oh, wait a minute.
But then it went to, and then now it's just, legal streaming, which is cutting into huge. You have to figure out a way to take care of that. But the thing is, you're going to get more of that. If people feel you're ripping them off, they're more likely to rip you off. Like, screw you, I'm going to fucking stream this thing or I'll get it illegally because it doesn't belong. Like Tank versus Frank Martin did not belong at a pay-per-view.
Nope.
Pay-per-views at one time meant that was a fight so big that it necessitated a pay-per-view.
There you go.
But that's not the case anymore. Now it's, these guys want so much money, the only way we can afford it. And half the time they don't get the money they expect. So when you hear a lot of these things, people throwing around money people get, you got to remember that money doesn't kick in almost every contract unless they sell 500,000 or more. That's when they start seeing backdoor money. So, for instance, Tank's last fight, I think what was his pay? $2 million, if that, 1.5. So he didn't even, because they didn't even sell more than 200,000.
So that's the other thing. It's like there's so many different sources out there that will, quote unquote, sources that will post what a guarantee is with because they've heard it and then said it can get up to X, Y, or Z if pi happens. I'm just throwing numbers out for ridiculousness, but I mean, if I read somewhere he was guaranteed 15, which I can't validate that article was correct, and then he was going to get up to 25 if the pay-per-view did well. That's the only part I believed, was if the pay-per-view did well. But aside from that, if he really was guaranteed 15 and not 1.5, then they lost huge money on that fight.
Yeah, that's a excellent insight right there as well. David, I'll give you the last word because I got to move on here to another phone call, man.
My final word is boxing as a cultural force. If there are more 15-year-olds on Snapchat every day who finds out about people like Ryan Garcia, and there's a 12-year-old getting a smartphone for the first time, seeing it on the algorithm, then our sport will not be dead. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for having me on, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Have
You
a good
too,
one.
David.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for calling in, man. Yeah, that's the optimist side. But I think there is potential to pump some blood back into the heart of boxing. Let's go to our phone call here. Let's go to 203. 203, you're on the air. 203, what's on your mind?
Yeah, what's up? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Well, I just want to, I guess the last caller kind of said it for me. He kind of blew his load. But I just want to leave you guys with an optimistic message. Listen, boxing will never die, but we all will die. And that's it. That's pretty much it, man.
Well, I don't know, but I plan on not dying, by the way. I'm going to merge with a machine one of these days. But shout out to you, man. You do your thing. If you want to go the carnal way, the mortal coil, you're certainly welcome to do so. All right. Hey, fellas, don't forget to hit the like. It really helps us out. All right, fellas? Let's go to our phone call here. Let's go to 713. 713, you're on the air. 713, what's on your mind?
Hello, BDA. This is Greg Terrible. Man, I don't think boxing is dying. It's changing. The viewers, how people view it, is changing because of the phone, to be honest with you. I also watch UFC, and not a lot of people go watch it. Like you think, it's taking over. Not really, man. Like, for example, I think the fighters, it's a big culprit. If they don't want to fight each other and practice themselves out, that's it. One example, like John Jones, I'm not like a real big fan of him, but I do go watch him. I'm not gonna lie to you. And he has a fun and God knows when. I don't know. And then that dude, that Brazilian guy Pereira, whatever his name is, he's the only guy in the UFC that's getting heavy rotation. But anyway, back to boxing. The only people that so far that really puts in puts in the work is, I hate to say it, it's Ryan, Golden Boy, and Top Rank, because they're gonna have this show soon with the Teofimo. And ever since Teofimo unified, this is his next fight. He's not turning down fights either. But that's my take on it. It looks like Tank has to sell 3 fights to equal 1 Canelo fight. That's what I'm saying. But I don't think even it's Tank's fault. Everybody wants a lot of money, but they're not it. That's my take on it. And then soon the Zone is going to be the only boxing buyer watch. And that's my take on it. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right. Bye. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for your call. Great observations, and take it easy out there. All right. That was Greg Terrible. Yeah, it's like other callers were saying. It's up to the boxers, too, can't control a lot of this. But the behavior of a lot of these fighters, I will say, is not helping the situation. Don't forget to hit the like. Really helps us out. Really helps us out. So it takes less than 2 seconds, so make sure to do that. Let's go to our phone call here. Let's go to 513. 513, you're on the air. 513, what's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, man? Yes, sir.
What's up, 513?
Great show, man. Great show.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, sir. Yes, I think it's a great time to be alive in boxing, man. We got possibly the greatest fighters ever fighting right now, or just stop fighting. We got Money Mayweather, we got Canelo Alvarez, we got Tank Davis, we got Ryan, we got Devin, we got so much. Deontay Wilder, Zhang, Tyson Fury, Usyk. I love this game. It's like the NBA, ain't it?
You know, you make.
It's like one of the best times to be alive.
You bring up a good point because so many people I've heard, especially old heads or older heads, that it used to be better back in the day, you know, back in the 70s and the 60s.
Right.
And I'm thinking, but wait a minute, like you said, look at you're right. Let's count the guys that are here now. Inoue, Crawford, Usyk, Canelo.
Anyway, I forgot one.
Exactly. We got Bam Rodriguez, only 24 years old this Saturday. I mean, yeah, it's a pretty good roster that we have right now.
We got Lomachenko, we got Rigondeaux, we got your boy Teofimo Lopez. This is like one of the greatest times. We gotta absorb it and take it. We already seen Mike Tyson. So I'm saying, look at our era. What we were using. I'm the old head you're talking about. So I can respect Rocky Marciano. He got 49 fights in by 31. Don't that sound familiar? Don't that sound like Canelo Alvarez, 50 fights by 30? That's why he's so difficult to beat, man. Because he got so much more experience over everybody. So when you got Crawford versus Canelo, Crawford fighting a guy with more experience that is bigger than him. So look at these guys we got now. So I'm just telling y'all, appreciate what we got. This is the greatest time to be alive. We got arguably the best fighters, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Money Mayweather. These things is, you know, I think it's so most they saying they've been giving you a negative feedback so far about where it's at.
No, not necessarily. In fact, we've had some pretty positive callers who are saying that thanks to the internet, boxing is actually doing quite well.
Yep. I agree. Look at Devin Haney. Don't nobody even like his ass. You got Ryan Garcia, the face of boxing. Tank, the face of boxing. Devin, the face of boxing. You got a lot of faces right now. Canelo Alvarez still the face. He been holding it down, about 10 years? Canelo been holding it down for a long time, making $50 million a fight. Anthony Joshua.
Oh, yeah, we forgot him, yeah.
Come on, man. It's just great. We done seen the most talent.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, in terms of the talent itself, yeah, boxing keeps churning out good professionals who are also entertaining to watch. That's a great caller. You reminded us of the amount of boxers that we have now.
Yes,
What's your name, by the way, or what's your nickname? What should we call you?
Hey, yeah, this CK from Cincinnati, Cincinnati King, CK. I just want to say, man, I like them all, man. You know, we be enemies. We hating on Canelo, hating on Devin, hating on. We all the same. We all fans. It's like the NFL. Either you with the Bengals or the Rams. You know how it goes. We got our favorites. That's right. Much love to your program, though, man. I'm gonna keep listening, brother.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the call there, Cincinnati K, and call back next time. Take it easy out there.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, that is a good point. In terms of, I'm really talking about, we're focusing on the broadcasting aspect of it and the promotional aspect. But in terms of the talent, yeah, listen, as long as there's people out there growing up in street fights or in a directionless state, and then boxing comes along and gives them a platform or an outlet, there's always going to be boxers, good boxers.
Well, you just hit the that's the key thing. Listen, the sports any sport. I don't care if it's NBA, baseball, hockey. It's only as good as its feeder system. And the fact that they're talking about dropping boxing from the Olympics speaks volumes to the health of the sport in the United States. As the United States became, I don't know, lack of a better word, richer, the sport became worse because wealthier people, the thought of putting their baby in a boxing match, you see them like they want to get rid of full tackle football because they can get a concussion. It's the pampering of children. Less and less people put the kids in any kind of combat sport, boxing. And if they do, either you put it in UFC because there's wrestling. You don't always have to get struck to the head. So for the many years, boxing was what people, especially at the time. Remember when boxing first came out, we were still in the Victorian era where there was class. There was the rich and the poor. And if you weren't born into the rich, you didn't just get it, even if you got money. You know what I mean? You had, right. It wasn't just an open door policy to come in amongst the blue bloods. So what was boxing was a way for, when you had tenements in New York City, 5 points, and you just had abject poverty like we couldn't even imagine. But what's the one thing a tough kid could do? Fight. And fight his way out of it. And so you had great Jewish boxers, great Irish, Puerto Rican, and it was all driven socioeconomically. Nowadays, even the poorest people in the United States has AC and cable TV. So what we call poor today is not poor back in the early 1900s. You have 4 families living in a fucking shithole tenement without electricity.
Excellent point.
Excellent point. That's the difference.
And that's why there are a lot of them coming from other countries. Now, I've never been to Warsaw, Poland, and places like that, former Soviet blocs that were forgotten about by their government. But I've been to not Panama City, but like Panama, like Cologne, Panama, and places like that. And I've seen poverty. I've seen these places where Connex boxes are turned into neighborhoods, and the only street light they have is a barrel of fire for that quote unquote neighborhood. Now, I didn't live in it. I drove past it. I'm not trying to say that I've experienced it. I have not. But that's what drives someone to say, I'm getting out of this. What can I do? All right. Like you said, I can fight. Okay. Well, I'm going to fight my way out of this. And that's where Arguello came from. And that's where Duran came from. And that's where Chavez came from. Exactly. Okay. So, no, I didn't come from that, but I know that's where they came from because I've seen where they came from. And Excellent. We don't have that here. And somebody wants hard times breed hard men. Well, our hard times now are they're political and stuff like that, but like the hard times of, I don't know where my next meal's coming from. Like you said, most inner city projects places have air conditioning. It may break a lot, and they may not do the upkeep on it, but they've got, a window unit and something like that, whereas down in Panama, they ain't no air conditioning. They're living in a Connex box. If you know what that is, that's a trailer on the back of a truck, on a semi that you see. That's how they live. That's what they live in. And that's their life. And the only way out of it, because there's not like a free education system, the only way out of it is to fight.
Exactly. And I always say, if there was a smart person, if this sheik really wanted to turn out great boxers, go to the country of Ghana. You have so many African kids who want to box, but if you actually go over there, they have literally rope tied off on dirt floors, and they shove shirts in a duffel bag for punching bag because they have no infrastructure. If somebody just spent the minimal amount of money there, you would turn out some great boxers. And that's what it usually comes from, fighting the way out of poverty. Like in Gano, like he used to shovel sand because they didn't have to fill up back of trucks. He did it by hand. Did that for 4 years. He said that's how he got strong. And then he took off and went up to Europe and lived inside a gym. He actually wanted to be a boxer, but he ended up going into MMA. But so that's where I agree. I think boxing worldwide, because a lot of Eastern Bloc countries, especially when the curtain fell, even to this day, some of the poorest countries in Europe are between Ukraine down in there. There's some just forgot about wretched poverty going on in the Slav countries. So is that where the next group's going to come? I mean,
listen.
Just look at the United States right now. It's not too good.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. That's what I was going to say too. In terms of Great Depression, hard economic times are coming in the United States, so we might see a new wave of boxers in about 20 years. But ever since the Eastern Bloc, from the former Soviet Union opened up and those fighters started coming here. I mean, look at the amount of Eastern European and Central Asian fighters that we've seen turn professionals, and it's adding a different flavor to boxing that was unseen prior to 2010. I want to give a big shout out, by the way, to Virtuoso for gifting five BDA boxing memberships. 2 different people. I forgot who was there. I didn't see I don't remember all the names. So shout out to Virtuoso for his generosity. All the other guys who received those memberships, shout out to them as well. And shout out to Virtuoso.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Hell yeah. Shout out to Virtuoso for doing that. Here's an applause team for you. Actually, that's not applause. Hold on. There we go. There you go. That's the applause for Virtuoso.
What the fuck ever?
Come on. No, wait a minute. No. Shout out to Virtuoso for his generosity. Really appreciate it. All right. So what we were talking about earlier, then we started this off. The question on the title, a bit sensationalistic about whether boxing is dead. But the reason why I started asking the question is because, again, I was reading that article called "The Rise and Fall of Boxing." Excuse me. The Rise and Fall of HBO Boxing. It was written by Joe Santoloquido over at Ring Magazine. It's a 3-part expose on the rise and fall of one of the greatest boxing institutions ever, which was HBO Boxing. And here's an interesting thing about what Bob Arum had to say about it. He says the height was in the mid-1980s to the mid-1990s. I think people realized that people at HBO knew what they were doing, and they knew how to keep their suppliers happy. When Seth Abraham left, that was forgotten. If you produce high-quality fights for HBO, they would do a fight for you that wasn't as good. They had a favor bank. You were constantly looking to do events for HBO, knowing they would find a way to reward you down the road. And see, that's interesting what Bob Arum said there, that every once in a while they'd give you a gimme. But that was after demanding the big fights from you. So they knew how to work with their promoters. You can't work without the promoters. They're the ones supplying the talent. And that's where I go right now with Top Rank and ESPN, their current situation in union, because it hasn't been all that great. I remember Steve Kim used to say that he used to talk to the former Showtime head, the guy before Ken Hirschman. I forget the guy's name, the guy that passed away. And he would always tell Steve, look, if forget Showtime, forget HBO, if ESPN gets into boxing, they really want boxing to succeed, they're going to drive us out of business. ESPN has gotten into boxing, but they haven't gone all in. And right now, what you're seeing with Top Rank and ESPN, look at the main event they have this Saturday. Teofimo Lopez versus Steve Claggett. That's a main event. I'm paying for ESPN for the app. And then on top of that, excuse me.
Joke.
Then they had.
But Disney's not going to invest
Let
in
me
the
just
boxing.
finish. Let me just finish. To give more examples, they had Xander Zayas taking on Teixeira. Teixeira was done. I mean, on paper it looked good, but it was apparent that Teixeira just wasn't that good. And then a couple of weeks from now, we have Janibek taking on a complete unknown, a guy that's never fought anybody, never beaten anybody, has never gone past 10 rounds, and he's on the main event against Janibek. I mean, I'm sorry, Top Rank, they're dropping the ball. I mean, I don't know if it's Top Rank's fault or if it's ESPN's or both of them, but those are horrible main events.
Well, Jimmy's going to understand this better than I am, so I'm not going to go too deep into the difference between the promotional company and the network. And I can't explain it, but I know that Disney is not going to invest heavily into boxing, and they own ESPN. Mm-hmm. So that part. And I've been saying for how many years now, BDA, that TV networks don't overly subsidize for fights anymore. They haven't done it since the Obama era.
Sure.
And so if Bob's going to do this, he's going to have to come out of his own pocket. Bob's not an idiot. He doesn't put out too much money than he has to on too many different fighters at one time because it doesn't work. And then if it doesn't pan out on the investment, like with Bud Crawford, look what happened. He lost Crawford. So they paid him more money than what he was bringing in. He lost money on the deal, and then Crawford left.
Exactly.
So Bob didn't come out on top of that at all. So again, if a TV network, which in this case technically is Disney, is not going to invest into it, and they're not, then what is Bob going to work with? He has a platform, but now he has to fit the whole bill on his own. He's only going to be able to put so much money into it to make something happen on TV. One quick point that the previous caller made about how the talent, what we should enjoy. And I enjoy looking at the bright side of, a rainbow or a train wreck if I can find one. And I'm not saying boxing is a train wreck right now. What I'm saying, though, is he's talking about everything now, and he named, but when he starts naming guys that are retired, like Floyd Maney, why wasn't he naming Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns? Those guys have been retired for a while now. Of the crop we have now, the problem is based off of what was going on in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, was each division that those guys he was naming in, or that they would have been in, like Ray Leonard, had a very deep welterweight division. Okay, Bud didn't. He had Spence, and the rest of the guys were Spence's leftovers that were overrated. That was not a stacked welterweight division. Bam Rodriguez, all these guys are old. Most of them don't know who they are. He doesn't have the Carbajal charisma. And then even when Carbajal had the charisma, there was a deep level of fighters that we knew who they were, even if they fought out of Korea. We knew who they were back then. So the depth level, we may have talented guys, but super middleweight, you had James Toney, you had Chris Eubank, you had Nigel Benn, you had Roy. I think I've made my point. Sure. Each division was extremely deep. I'll be right there. They're extremely deep, and we don't have that now. You may have really excellent fighters like the caller named, that I'm not disputing that. But the depth, what they have around them, they are the star around very little talent most of the time.
That's why the smaller weight classes, it's easier than getting big guys. That's why the smaller weight classes tend to be deeper in talent. And if you compare it to back in the day, think about it. Muhammad Ali fought 71 million people worldwide tuned into the fight. if these guys get 1 million viewers, it's like patting each other on the back. So just on a global aspect, it's not even close. And there's a reason for that. It's the feeder system. Listen, back in the day, every single weekend, if I wanted to go to a fight, I could go to one within usually a couple-hour drive, whether it was Foxwoods, or even before Foxwoods, if I wanted to take the 6-hour ride down Atlantic City. They'd have fights. Sometimes they weren't on television, but there was constant fights. The VFW, the fucking the Knights of Columbus. They would throw on fights. There would be where these guys would only have 4 or 5 pro fights. There'd be 600-700 people show up for it, and it's usually the local guys. You know, a local fighter has a promoter who's out there in the streets, going to local bars. Hey, go see my fighter this weekend. You couldn't go in the neighborhood bar without at least 1 or 2 promoters every weekend showing up. Go check out my kid. You know, he'd give you 1 ticket and then say here's 3 more that you have to turn in and pay for at the door to incite you to go. You know what I mean? You don't see that anymore. No promoters are showing up in bars or in restaurants because there's not enough fighters to even do that. It was a part of the culture. That's what I can't stress the difference. It was a part of the culture back then. The city I grew up in with 100,000 people had 10 gyms.
Jeez Louise.
10.
Yeah, that's
110,000 people with 10 gyms.
That's a highly concentration of high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now there's 1.
Yeah, you know, even here in Montreal, in Canada, it's a big fight city. In Quebec, it is the hub of Canadian boxing, and even then, you can't. I mean, like I said, because of the pandemic, the hub of boxing where I used to go to, it was a bar. It was for old heads. You had all the hardcore boxing fans show up, and because of the pandemic, it closed. Since 1989, it was open, and all those memories, you know. Well, not gone, but I mean, you get what I'm saying. So now if I want to see a fight, I don't even know how they work it out with DAZN, because DAZN is not a network per se. They still have to pay a fee to televise their fights on a bar. So I don't even know if they're willing to do that anymore. I haven't gone out to see a fight in a bar in years. So yeah, you're right, man. Even here in Montreal, it's a fight town, and it's troublesome.
It's sparse now. I mean, think about it. As a kid, the Golden Gloves, it was held at the Lowell Auditorium. I don't know what it seats, I think 1,200 people. That shit was sold out within 2 days. Everybody knew the tickets go on sale before they started doing like you could buy in blocks. But they were sold out. It was all season ticket holders mostly, but it was just gone. There were very few tickets the night of the fight. I mean, that was the Images. It was packed every Tuesday and Thursday night, you know? And it started like late September, and the finals were done by February. I mean, my grandfather, my father's father, had 11 boys in his family. 9 of them won at least the local Golden Gloves. 6 of them won like the New England's, and 2 won the Nationals. But 9 brothers fought in the Golden Gloves because everybody boxed. That was the sport everybody could do because there was no little league. There was the youth. Your church ran leagues, little baseball leagues and shit. But very, very, and most kids were too poor to have baseball gloves and the sneakers or cleats or whatever. But what they could do is fucking go down to the gym and hit a punching bag and learn how to fight.
That's right. Yeah, that's why boxing is
totally different.
Some people call it the poor man's sport. It doesn't take much, you know, to go out there and become a boxer, like Jimmy said, in terms of the equipment.
And here's the thing, too, Mr. B, real quick, I'll finish on this. There was always a local rich guy, too. Or a guy who, you know, maybe he owned a local taxi cab, because I was here in Lowell. I remember when I started, there was 4 gyms left. He was always showing up, telling kids, if you were good, right? And he'd talk to Max. He's the guy who ran my place, right? And he would say, hey, is this kid show up all the time? And if he said, yeah, listen, it's the money thing, the dues. He would come up to you and say, listen, don't disappoint me. I'll pay for the year. Then you have no excuse. You need tape, you come see me. Here's my phone number. That guy ended up he was a feeder dude. He was introducing kids to promoters. I mean, but you had that. You had guys looking out, even if he wasn't that rich. We had one guy, I remember, dude, this guy lived in a tenement. He didn't have money, but almost every dollar he had, he was buying tape for the local kids, wraps for their hands, because the kids didn't have the money for it. But I'm talking about kids, you know, young kids.
I was reading
that's not happening anymore.
Yeah, you know, I mentioned Michael Spinks earlier because I read his book, his biography from the Promised Land, And it talks about how him and Michael, him and Leon, his brother, that's what they were doing. Over there in St. Louis, there was a guy who used to work at the post office. He was an Army veteran. And he had a gym. And he would he would pick up the kids, cram them all into his car, and take them to the gym. And, without the knowledge of a lot of people, he used to buy them sneakers and the equipment and all that, like right out of his pocket. Because it was a community thing. It was a community thing. Nowadays, I don't know if that still happens, but like you said, it seems like less and less. I mean, I hear about it a little bit here in Canada, in Montreal, but I don't know if it's how much of it is happening in the United States.
The local police used to give you tape. If you were a poor kid, you went down to the local police department, they would give you boxing tape. So that if you were good, but you didn't have money, but you were going to fight in the Golden Gloves, the local police would they had a fund, the local police boxing fund. They would buy the Axis Tiger shoes.
But I heard
boxing shoes.
But I heard they used to lace it with cocaine, so in case they want an easy bust. Then they would go, "Hey, let's pick up that kid that we gave the tape to." By the way, shout out to Just Brian for his contribution with the super chat. He says, "In a different universe where we did not have Heyman or Floyd, do you think the sport would actually be bigger now than it was in the golden age?" Shout out to Just Brian for his contribution. I'll say this. Floyd Mayweather did, and especially that Mayweather-Pacquiao fight, did leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. It soured boxing. But when he did fight Mosley, when he fought Marquez, when he fought De La Hoya, those were big events. And whenever there's a big event, it attracts good numbers for boxing. And that's good in its own way as well. I mean, that's what it's all about. That's what we're talking about. So shout out to Just Brian for his... Yeah.
And I'd say I'd answer Brian too and say no. And the reason being... When I was a kid, like nobody played soccer. I was an oddball because my gym teacher in grade school was from Ireland. And he started a soccer league firsthand. And I was, kids, soccer, the fucking playing like, so that didn't take really till the 90s. But you didn't have any of that shit. Baseball, hockey leagues, all this other shit. So there was boxing or you could play high school football. That's pretty much the sports, and baseball too in the summer. But that was it. Boxing was that, and again, the church would do basketball leagues, the CYO. But again, boxing was the fucking sport. It was the main sport here at Lowell. Like everybody, if your family lived here in the 50s, you know what I mean? You had at least one or two males who fought in gloves. Like I couldn't begin to tell you in high school how many kids walked around with the Acre Boxing Club, West End Gym. Like they had those, sports boxing jackets. Like the whole high school had boxes in it. It's just amazing now that it isn't like that at all anymore.
Yeah, there you go. See, you compare boxing to where it was before, and you compare it to where it is now. There's a lot missing. That's for sure. Shout out to Flowstate 407 who says, "BA, earlier you said to me that the pay-per-view buys matter, not the views. I wish to add the point that views equals money because social media views equal advertisement money." But here's what you have to take into consideration. Yeah, I don't know how they factor in now the social media activity. That's certainly a big component now. But just because it does good views or it does well on social media doesn't translate to the actual advertisements being seen during the fight. I'll give you an example. When Caleb Plant and David Benavidez were about to fight, the PBC had on their channel, they had that behind-the-scenes feature that they do, that half-hour behind-the-scenes. It did 1 million views on YouTube. The fight did 50,000 pay-per-view buys. So, it's all well and good when it's doing well and it's gaining traction on the internet, but ultimately if people don't pay for the fight or don't watch it on DAZN or whatever other application it is, if it's not pay-per-view, if people don't watch it, it's kaput. The people, the executives don't care if it did well on social media if it turns out that nobody's watching it. I'll give you another example. Piracy. In terms of music, piracy has definitely destroyed and hollowed out the music industry. Yeah, people can pirate the music and people can talk about certain musicians on the internet, but if they're not buying the records, the record companies don't care if they gain a lot of traction on the internet. They care about the sales. And it's the same thing with boxing now. Yes, I agree. A lot of people know who Ryan Garcia is. Guess what? A lot of people aren't buying his fights. So it's not as simple as just saying, "Oh, look, this video did 1 million views on YouTube. That means 1 million people are going to buy the fight." The pay-per-view buys say otherwise.
100%. Absolutely. And if somebody could have wrote, right, if someone could have come up to you, Mr. BDA, in the 1990s and said, what's the best possible way we can destroy the sport? I know. let's tribalize it to fucking promoters sign network deals, and they can only fight people within that network and an occasional guy who slips through the cracks, right? And then let's put meaningless fights that nobody was asking for behind a paywall, and the ones that aren't on a paywall are on a subscription that you have to pay for. Or I could fucking go sit on my couch and turn on cable or TV and watch the hockey game or NBA or Major League Baseball or football. So, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the sport did everything it possibly could do to ruin the sport, to make it even harder to watch. There's no sport. And they fight so infrequently. There's no storyline. You know what I mean? Like, you don't get to know the fighters.
Yeah,
like
I did.
Virgil Ortiz. I mean, you have to search it out on your own, go into his fucking Instagram and look shit up. Like, you know, that type of shit used to be shown on TV. You learned about the fighter because it was a storyline about him.
Well, see, now that's where I sort of disagree. So that's where I sort of disagree and agree with what the David had said on the phone, that because of the internet, you do get an inside look into fighters nowadays. You know, with the behind the scenes features. You know, the Zone has their own. If you go on YouTube, the Zone will give you behind the scene features. Top Rank as well. The PBC does it, and then on top of that, fighters have their own social media platform, so you can get a little bit more from them. So in that regard, maybe you don't see that on TV, Jimmy, but it's certainly taking.
But you have to search that out, though. You already have to be a fan of that person.
That's
People
true.
Just aren't randomly, you know. But like, if you put on HBO Boxing, you know how many times I was like, "Who the fuck is this dude?" I saw that fight, and I wanted to know. You know what I mean? And
that's a good
like,
point.
You know, and I don't know. So then it funnels everything down to the hardcore people. You just tribalize the sport till there's only a handful of hardcore, and it shows in the fucking pay-per-view buys.
That's true.
You know
That's
what
true
I'm
because
saying?
yeah, you're absolutely right. Though that's a great point because studies have shown that most people who, when they use internet or visit internet websites, they're essentially visiting about 3 or 4 websites per day continuously. That they're stuck in their ways. Very few people actually seek out new things. So you're right. You are correct about that. Yeah, that's true because most people will. You know, if you're a hardcore boxing fan, yeah, you in your Twitter feed, things will come up from Rolly Romero and Danny Garcia. I mean, David Haney bickering with Ryan Garcia and all that. But most people, who've never watched boxing, you're right. It's not going to come up for them all that much. So that's a good point right there as well. We got a super chat here. Shout out to Flow State again for his contribution to the super chat. He says, if advertisers see that a single Ryan KO clip got 1 million views, they know it's worth it to pay to inject their ad in the 30-second mark. Eyeballs equals money. Yeah, but again, eyeballs in the actual fight, you have to translate what's going on in the internet onto the actual fight itself. If 1 million people know who Ryan Garcia is, but they're not paying for the Zone to watch his fights or paying the pay-per-views, then it's immaterial how many people know who he is. Jimmy, I don't know how else to explain it. Like, how else would you put it with what I just say?
No, I understand. No, I think you're making a very good point. It's true. It's almost 2 different worlds. You know what I mean? Like, there's the Twitter sphere and people. And again, I think only 24% of the United States is on Twitter.
30-something%.
Uses it regularly.
Exactly.
So there's a big chunk of people out there who are working all day and they don't even have time.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. Advertising is about getting you to buy something, whether it's the Zone, so you can watch it and then see the advertisements there, or give them money via the subscription, or the pay-per-view, which is you giving them money for the event. If people know who Ryan Garcia is and then they steal the fight, yeah, people know who Ryan Garcia is, but they're not. The companies aren't making money. And eventually what they're going to say is, hey, this guy is not the draw that we thought. We're going to stop paying him or stop televising his fights outright. That's what I'm talking about here. Shout out to Rapax Trucking Company for his contribution with the super chat. He says, boxing needs a James Miller to parachute into the ring. Estrada versus Bam. Like the Bull versus Holyfield. Yeah, the fan man ended up killing himself. He wasn't all that happy. So, and he's lucky he didn't kill anybody. He's lucky he didn't kill anybody.
He really was.
Yeah, man.
Boxing beat the shit out of him too. Did you see that?
Yeah.
They were beating the fuck out of him. The cornerman was punching him. Everybody was swinging on him. What the fuck are you doing, dude? Once they realized it wasn't, a lot of people first thought it was a part of the show, and he was having a crash landing.
Right? They were like, what the fuck? You know? And when they realized he was just a lunatic, man, they beat him with his own helmet.
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, that was pre 9/11. Imagine now if somebody does that now, man. I think the cops would shoot him while he was in the air, just to make sure he's not
probably
dropping. Man, dropping in with a bomb or something.
He's yelling,
Oh shit! No, hey, if I'm in the crowd and I hear that, I don't care who I have to shove out of the way, man. I don't care if it's an old lady. I'm getting out of there, man. Like the clown, like George in Seinfeld when he saw fire in the kitchen and just started pushing all the kids to the side. But I wanted to go back to this. Okay, so then going back to the rise and fall of HBO, the article on Ring TV, Lou DiBella says something interesting. He says that we, talking about the whole team at HBO Boxing, made it work, and why we made it work for all of our egos, and despite all the shit going on, we believed in HBO sports and we had pride in HBO Boxing. We felt we were the custodians of boxing. We believed we had a responsibility. It was our money back then that made the biggest and best fights happen. We felt our interest in HBO in providing the best programming was aligned with boxing's best interests in having the best fights. So you see, so they were interested in providing a good product and a quality product to keep the subscriptions coming. My question is, reading that passage is, does the PBC feel the same way? And not just the PBC, but just anybody else in particular involved in boxing? Because Jimmy, some of the things that these boxer insiders say to the fans on Twitter, or even boxing fans as well, they show a lot of disdain towards the average boxing fan, and I can understand why, because there are a lot of boxing fans that, as a whole, just love to complain. But don't you get the feeling, perusing Twitter, that some of these boxers and boxing network and promoters sort of like talk down to their own fan base?
Of course, I see it all the time, dude, and it blows my mind. But then, like you said, the toxicity of, especially the Twitter people, it's a curse and a plus, right? I mean, that's the curse. There was never that. There was a reason why there was like boxers used to show up at fights, and after a fight they would hang around, sign gloves. Nowadays they don't want to talk to fans because they're looking at everybody. Yeah, you the motherfucker who was running your mouth on Twitter saying my girl's fat and I'm a pussy. I got no chin. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Your fucking feed is full of that shit. Like, it doesn't give you the fucking drive to want to go out and meet these people. Of course you're gonna have your true people who are just fans, But then again, if you actually compliment them too hard, then you're gonna people in your feed say, "Fucking suck up, dick rider." You know what I mean? Like, so it's such a toxic app when it comes to this sport. At least for me, I think it's devolved into that. I thought it was much better before. I don't know. YouTube is good. I think YouTube's actually keeping the sport alive more than anything.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a good point.
Thanks God for the Sheik and his money.
Hey, Jimmy.
Seriously, right now at this point, yes,
we're keeping boxing alive. How about that? It's all us.
We are, exactly.
It's all us. No, but the reason why I brought up that's a good. Yeah, that's why I said I understand why some people talk down on the boxing fans, but sometimes I hear the complaint of these insiders and executives. It's like, oh, you guys complain too much. Well, here's my thing. There's always, if you're in the business and you're selling a product, whether it's entertainment or skin cream, whatever, expect detractors. That's just the nature of the business. And I would allow a lot, here on the YouTube thing, I allow people to say whatever they want against us. If people want to say we don't know anything about, and I've heard a couple of those comments just this last week. Oh, BD doesn't know what he's talking about, blah, blah. And I go, okay, fine. They have a right to say that. They have a right to say whatever they want. But my thing is, for these boxing insiders is, if that's the real problem for them, if it really hurts their delicate sensibilities that people complain, again, that's not as bad as making people pay $85 for a product that ends up bombing. That's the reality. So yeah, when they make the right moves, there's always going to be a couple of people that complain. But take a look too at the positive reaction that you're getting, not just at the bad, because psychological studies have also shown that we tend to focus or make a big deal out of the negative situations in life as opposed to the positive ones. So I think it's the same thing with a lot of these insiders. They focus too much on the crazy people, the detractors, as opposed to looking at people like us, who I always try to give, like Frank Martin versus Tank Davis. I try to give it a positive spin too. I try to promote that fight in the build-up to it. So, try to give those people a little attention too.
And you're 100% right. There's actual studies on that humans just tend to. Like if somebody gives you a bad review of a restaurant, you're far more likely to remember that than if somebody told you it was good food there.
Exactly.
They've proven that over and over again. So yeah, the power of people tend to remember negatives because negatives triggers a certain pheromone, and you're like, oh, negativeness, like which at the end of the day equals harm. So it's just that whole side of it. So you tend to remember the negative.
Exactly.
Like they say all the time. You say, you're like fucking. You saw Jesus Christ. Holy fucking nut, lunatic. But you say, man, you see the devil. Everybody's like, ooh. You know what I mean? Like so many people, right? You're like, people believe you saw the devil, right? But, I saw Jesus and his angels. Oh my God! Okay, get the fucking padded room. But you say the devil's walking amongst us, everybody's like, fucking right he is. You know what I mean?
It's true, man.
People
You're
just
absolutely
believe
right.
the negative, man.
And you're right. It is because of that instinctual self-preservation thing that we take notice more of the bad because it behooves us to do so. By the way, don't forget to hit the like, fellas. Hit the like. It really helps us out. Let's go to the phone lines here. Let's go to 929. 929, you're on the air. 929, what's on your mind?
BDA, what's going on? Jimmy, what's up, man? Real quick, man.
What's up, brother?
What's up, man? Those gifted membership, that was by accident. That was the most random act of kindness I've ever done. But because really, I'm a cheap bastard. But enjoy, guys. So the people that they got a membership, enjoy while they're
Wait. Are you being serious or?
So yeah. No, I'm serious. That was by accident, but I don't. That's fine. I mean, I got money to burn, but kind of mindful of that. But
that's why you got money to burn.
I want to talk about. I want to talk about tonight's topic. Me personally, as a boxing fan, I felt like I've seen the boxing's declining mainstream appeal from when I was in high school, like from 03 to 06, starting with The Contender. You remember that show on ESPN?
Absolutely, yeah.
There was a reality show. Yeah. Only Sergio Mora came out the winner, and that's it. But there was a few other somewhat talented fighters there that one of them actually became a Hall of Famer, strangely. Yeah.
Didn't Sergio Mora win that shit?
Sergio Mora, E.J. Smith, Alfonso Gomez, I mean, they kind of had distinguishable careers, but, they didn't quite become GOAT status. And I felt like that reality show should have been expanded, but I guess boxing wasn't seen as valuable to ESPN. And that's where I felt that it was losing its grip on terrestrial television because that's what it used to be on. And up to like 2006, where I felt like Floyd Mayweather was on the cutting edge of becoming a star. That's when he started doing that diva shit, and then around that same time, Rocky Balboa came out, which was universally panned, and that movie was a cultural event, but I guess people didn't care about that movie all that much. It's not the way it used to be, and that's when I figured, okay, this is when it was starting to lose mainstream American appeal. Because I remember when De La Hoya fought Mayweather, and all people kept saying, especially within the mainstream media, was that was the fight to save boxing.
Right.
As if boxing needed saving, right? There was always going to be a big fight, behind that one, but it felt like mainstream America was losing touch with boxing, so they didn't acquaint themselves with the fighters. And yeah, it's becoming more localized because what Jimmy said is right about these gyms shutting down, and I think that's a byproduct of raising interest on real estate. Real estate swallows up business when the rate goes up. They can't keep up. And that's also I wouldn't say conflated, but it kind of is linked to the changing of the times when boxing is seen as more of a brutal sport and highly exploitative, and you see athletes here in America who are geared more towards becoming basketball players and football players. The NFL and NBA offer way more money than boxing. And that's what discourages people from joining the sport. There's also, there's an economic angle to this thing. But yeah, man, that's just how I felt that this was going to go. This sport was going to go by the wayside, and Heyman, did not help things. Because him being a hermit manager / promoter did not help things by trying to delegate the responsibility to promote fighters on the fighters, because they don't know how to promote themselves. They don't know how to talk, and quite frankly, these guys today are public relations nightmare. They have no filter, and that's what gets people scare these brands away, from promoting them. Only Canelo, AJ, Crawford to an extent, or to me, have some crossover appeal, because they have, advertisement, and people do talk about them, to a certain extent. But,
that's right. That's a great way of breaking it down there, Virtuoso. Yeah, and it's a lot of these guys. Like, I'll give you an example. When Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney were about to fight, I expected it to bomb on pay-per-view. And a lot of people were saying, no, look at how much traction it's getting on Twitter, and people are talking about it and reposting the videos. I said, yeah, but it's doing well on the internet, but how many people are actually going to buy it? Then they came out with a number that it did over 500,000 pay-per-view buys, but in the latest 3 knockdown rules, Steve Kim said he heard from his source that it did about 400,000 or less. So if we were to believe Steve Kim and his source, then it turned out to be true. All the theatrics and the lunacy from that Ryan Garcia Devin Haney fight, it didn't really translate into a box office bonanza.
Right, because the social media metrics doesn't correlate to pay-per-view buys, man. There's people in the real world that got shit to do. They don't spend time on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube becoming fanators trying to capture these fighters that have an an overinflated sense of value. There's also that these fighters today are kind of even though the money has gotten smaller, but fighters today have become more and more unrealistic. And Turkey Al-Sheikh has kind of interjected here with the capital that he swings around.
Right.
So that thing, trying to hype up a fighter, that and all that shit talking to me and gatekeeping boxing fandom is really turning off mainstream audiences. So how do you expect to gain a following if one, you got fanboys that hype you up and you're inactive, and 2, you're not exciting enough. You're not really getting out there and putting your name out there. So it's a two-way street.
That's right. That's the great way of putting it there, Virtuoso. Listen, we got to move on here, but man, thank you for your call, and again, thank you for the memberships there. Hopefully people enjoy them, and we'll catch you on the next one, man.
Yes.
All right. Take it easy.
All right. Peace.
Jimmy, Virtuoso brought up an interesting point there about how can people be promoted, and one guy that I've often said is on the cusp of superstardom is Tank Davis, but as you so eloquently said a couple of episodes ago, you need corporate backing to become a mainstream star, and like you said, Tank Davis with his outside the ring antics, highly doubtful that anyone's going to want to back him.
No, they wouldn't touch. Listen, in NHL, I don't know if you saw that this year, and I think it's disgusting that they're going to really do this to this kid. Because he was 15 years old, a Canadian kid, and he said racist things, and somebody happened to record. He was 15. He can't play in the NHL. They fucking voted on it. Nope. The Bruins actually drafted him or signed him. Kid's in his 20s, apologized at workshops. Nope, can't play in the NHL. You slap your fucking wife, get an arrest, out for a year. Right?
Wow.
Do you think... Wow, I mean, dude, it's gotten so woke. Well, of course, it's Canadian-run sport. You know what's going on.
Hey,
so that's the whole thing. But no, it is Canada government. Dude, you see how it is. You see,
yeah.
But now you're gonna understand the people at the ESPN. You guys boxing is right now. ESPN is run by crazy. Steve Kim will tell you that's why he walked out. Like, yeah, I'll take the early buyout. Thank you. He hated it there. It was they had fucking more HR department heads of diversity And so the biggest star this week just said, telling somebody, you need to shut your white ass up. I mean, like, picture the other way around. If that was a white guy said, you need to shut your black ass up about Steve, on ESPN, they would have fucking, they would be burning down ESPN. But so because of it's so woke, they can't stand boxing. The people there, they can't stand. Listen, it's the ultimate toxic masculinity. Did you notice on ESPN? When's the last time you saw a nice close up of a ring girl's fucking booty?
That's right.
Right. That used to be an intricate part of boxing matches. By the 90s, they were pulling in bathing suits, fucking so far up their ass crack and fucking, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it would just, they'd be fucking strutting along, crowd going crazy. Yeah, that's the ultimate objectification of women. Those people at ESPN hate everything about boxing.
Yeah, and may I say too,
for the crowds.
I've often encountered that problem. I'm not gonna get too much into where, but the point is, I've encountered that type of thing even before it became prevalent in the 2010s. Before that, I used, to get into debates about that with people about, people, the objectification of women, the male gaze, they called it in academics, where it's about in movies they put women there as objects to be objectified. And I've often said, look, there's a difference between objectifying a woman as an object and as fetishizing her, in other words, just as something that's filled with holes and tits. There's a difference between that and admiring a woman's beauty, like the way they used to do in art. It's called aesthetics. There's an actual fucking branch of art study called aesthetics, which is about analyzing beauty. So there's a difference between that and just saying, oh, look, like the old joke, what's the difference between the vagina and the cunt, the joke, right? I'm not gonna get into the punchline here, but that is objectifying a woman. That's objectifying a woman. Just having a woman, a beautiful woman holding up a ring card. I mean, what's so bad in that? Why? But then again, you know how it is, and I don't want to get into that right now, though, because we're going to go too far. We're on limited time here.
But I'm saying that's the people. But that's the people in ESPN. That's boxing's everything they're against now.
Exactly.
And even like I know a Portuguese girl who was a ring girl, dude. She made bank, and she'd do like big fights. They pay, say, I'm making $500 to walk around holding a card. She'd shake it. You know what I mean? A lot of those girls, too. String bikinis, and the crowd be going berserk, especially like out at the fucking New Jersey fights, man. They get some crazy good bimbos out there doing those cards. But here's the thing, right? God makes beautiful, stupid women. Not every woman can be a lawyer. And if some chicks, their body is what they get, and they have a short period to make money off it. And they'll do Bud fucking Wise of fucking ads back then, ring girl shit. They weren't curing cancer, but their assets were their assets, and I'm getting objectified and I'm getting paid well for it. So shut the fuck up.
Exactly.
Just look at the women who were saying that, though. The women who were saying that are fucking 200 pounds with bad skin.
Exactly. It's always like that. It's a time. It's a tale as old as time. I got to fast forward here, though, because we got to still have a lot. I have a lot of notes here about that article.
Okay.
What's his name? Who was it again? Yeah, Lou DiBella, who was a talent agent for HBO Boxing, said. It's interesting. He used to go to gyms and to smaller cards to scout talent. He used to do that. It was work, but he liked it because it wasn't work for him because he enjoyed it. He liked boxing, and that's how he found Arturo Gatti in a small card. He went to a small card. Well, there you go. He went to a small card, and he was actually scouting somebody else initially, and then he saw Gatti. He said, "Hey, I want that kid." He said he also knew who Barrera was when he turned pro at 15. He already had him on his radar then, so hence why he was the inaugural fighter for Boxing After Dark. DiBella continues by saying...
It's so crazy because Lou DiBella gets so much hate on Twitter, and people don't realize how important he was at one point, but he kind of sold his soul when he crossed over and he sold his promoter's license to Al Heyman, and then got fired for trying to make the Wilder fight. But listen, you know what? I always say, no matter what he did to piss me off, I'd always say, but it's because of him Mickey ended up on HBO. You know what I mean? It was because Lou's the one who got him. Saw him in a fight, heard about him, and he said, man, listen, this kid is just because of his toughness. We know this kid never mails it in. And especially when he was seeing him break his hand, you know what I mean? He was on ESPN, he's like, broke his hand in the first fucking round, and they knew it was broken. He never threw it again, really. It was that broken, but he never quit. fought 10 fights. It's like, why? You're going to lose the fight. Clearly, you're going to get beat up. But like Lou said, the kid won't fucking quit. He'd rather take the beating than get a TKO.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that
So
because
that was the type of, yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I used to talk to a guy who owned a boxing gym, and he used to put on events every other month. He would put on these amateur boxing events, and there was this MMA guy training there, bald tattooed guy. Can you believe that, Jimmy? A bald tattooed white guy in MMA. I've never seen that before. But he was training MMA, and he wasn't the best boxer, but he had a lot of explosiveness, and he went after guys. He always gone for the knockout. And the gym owner who put together this card said, "Look, I whenever I see that guy, I want to try to get him into one of my cards because I know he's going to bring it, and I know he's going to entertain the fans." And it's true because you can only put so many kids in there. I mean, the card would vary from high-level amateurs to people who were just having their first fight, for example, or their second fight. So the boxing really wasn't at that high level. And then you would have kids fighting, 11-year-olds. So you had to put in there people that would bring it every once in a while, sprinkle in some tough fights. And so it's the same thing with HBO Boxing. They knew at the height of their powers that they could get the biggest names because of the big checkbook that they brought, HBO. But because of that big budget that they had, they could also bring in the smaller guys. They could get a Roy Jones into a contract just to say, hey, we have the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. And then on top of that, like you said, they brought in bruisers like Mickey Ward and Vince Phillips and Antonio Diaz and all those other, like I said, bruisers, because you knew they were going to deliver entertaining fights. You can only put on so many boxing exhibitions, the sweet science, before people start getting bored.
Exactly.
And how many times did Mickey Ward
It wasn't always about it was just about how tough they were. Were they going to put on good fights?
Right. I mean, look at Guidi and Ward. You can count on the fingers of your hands how many boring fights they had. Very little. I think you can count them on one hand, the amount of so-so fights they had. Everything else, it was always a war. So
paid pennies. Think about that. The first Ward Gotti fight, they didn't get $1 million. I think Mickey was being paid 120. So after taxes and everything else, like I always said, he could blow it in one good summer on fucking cocaine and fucking strip joints easily.
There you go, man.
Seriously, he finally walked home with. The next two, he finally got some money because they beat each other half to death for pennies on the dollar.
Right.
So when I see guys turning down fucking $15 million 3-fight deals who bore you to death when they fight, it makes me want to fucking never watch the sport again.
And we're going to get to you. I hope we get to that point here because I want you to remind me of that. I think I'm going to remind myself when I get to this part of the article, but the importance of putting in entertaining fighters. We don't see entertaining fighters being promoted the same way anymore. But real quick, so what's his name? DiBella says that HBO Boxing and HBO Sports kept growing after 1985. Boxing was a force in sports television. HBO Boxing was not only a force in boxing, we were a force in sports television, he says. We put the tuxedo on boxing. My Rolodex, he says, in the 1990s and early 2000s was filled with the names of Hollywood stars and actors and politicians and sports stars because everyone who loved boxing was an HBO Boxing fan. He says, I remember Michael Fuchs, I think that's his name, writing me that he's bragging about a bet that he won. But see, that's again, that paragraph reminds me, how many stars do we see at boxing events anymore? The last time we saw Donald Trump, for example, at a boxing event was Golovkin versus Lemieux in New York in 2015. Ever since then, we only see him at UFC functions. And I understand it's because he's friends with Dana White. Of course, there's that connection. But I can't remember for the life of me when the last time we saw a real event where people said, okay, I'm going to show, like maybe Garcia, Tank Davis. What, they had a 6-year-old Madonna there, I think, and a couple of NBA guys.
And that should tell you everything. Donald Trump made his bones in the sports was in boxing.
Right.
When he built the Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. He had events. I mean, Mike Tyson and him are friends. Mike Tyson caught a lot of shit for saying that. You know what I mean? Like all those guys, like all of a sudden, wait a minute, Donald Trump suddenly racist? How come he was the only one who ever treated us good? Put the fighters up in fucking his suites, like he treated them like fucking royalty. Even guys who weren't world champions, if they were, if they were the main card, put them up in suites and shit. Everybody loved fighting at the Trump Taj Mahal.
Excellent point right there. Then DiBella continues by saying, I don't know. So that's the debate right there. But then Ross Greenberg says, and he was the guy that took over HBO Boxing after 2000. He said, "We felt dominant. We felt like we were not only buying the most significant fights, but quite honestly, we put together the best broadcast team." And I wrote here, "Can the same be said today?" Jimmy, can the same be said today in terms of broadcast of the commentators for boxing, for the Zone and Top Rank and the PBC?
God, no.
Oh.
God, no. It's terrible. It really is. It's. I don't know if they have a written law, if they're told to do this, but the obvious bias, whether it's for a company man or someone who looks like you, bleeds through these guys. If you would have watched that, if you were blind or you were deaf, and all you had was the ability to listen to the commentators, you would have scored Benavidez, Vojnik a shutout, and you'd be sitting there with your little fucking stick walking around, bumping into shit. Jesus Christ, the Vojnik, I don't even think land a punch. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It was so obvious who they were told to talk up. Every fucking replay between rounds is what a punch that Benavidez, even a round that Benavidez lost wide, it was showing the one jab he got in good. So that was one of the worst I've ever seen as far as commentary. I thought it was just literally my respect every round for Joe Goosen went down, and at the end, I got him 9-0. I was like, holy shit, Joe.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm not gonna sit here and say the HBO team was perfect, but it was certainly more professional than what it is now. And that's the other thing that they mentioned in this article, that when Tyson Douglas happened, and Buster Douglas pulled out perhaps the biggest upset of all time, the commentators, they stayed as quiet as the crowd. They didn't try to play it up because they knew they had to accommodate the situation. And those were true professionals. Nowadays, I think they don't have that same freedom because the truck, and the producers in ESPN and the Zone, they're like, hey, no, you got to ham it up. It's like MMA, it's like in the UFC. Every time there's a knockout, you get Joe Rogan's reaction and Daniel Cormier's reaction. They go wild, and I think that's what they're looking for. And it's boxing used to be classy, and I'm not saying it's got to be 100% classy because that can get boring too. But you don't have to go all out either, like you're at a racetrack on LSD.
And then Mr. B.
Sure, yeah.
And Mr. BDA, oh, sorry.
No,
I was just saying, and then you hire commentators who don't know boxing. Like Brian Kenny, you heard what he said about the war. What he said about the fucking the beginning of the 12th round of the third Fury Wilder fight. He said, This is Ward Gotti at the heavyweight level.
But see, they have
remember.
To,
so when you have that kind of just gross.
Yeah, but
hearing you, Mr. BD.
Yeah, you're breaking up too. Yeah, you're breaking up on top of that. I don't know if you want to jump out and jump back in. But I will say about the Brian Kenny thing. He was probably
sounds good. Okay.
He was probably told to do that, Brian Kenny. That's one of those things where he's the main commentator, so he's gotta. They tell him in the truck, hey, you got. I think I don't know. I'm not speculating, but you could be right. Maybe it's just him because he's been around boxing for a while too, ever since the ESPN days. So I'd be surprised if he really believed that. I don't know. Maybe he just got caught up in the moment. Either way, it was a dumb comment to make. I agree with you there. Here's the other interesting thing. Thomas Hauser says, in regards to HBO Boxing, he says they had a great run with Mike Tyson. Then they lost Mike, but they came back with Riddick Bowe, Evander Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, and the Klitschko brothers in the heavyweight division. They had Marvin Hagler, Tommy Hearns in 1985. They had Hagler Leonard in 87. The first big fight of the 90s was Tyson Douglas, followed by Chavez versus Taylor. They had Oscar De La Hoya, Roy Jones. It was quite a roster. And that's the thing that I wanted to bring up there. That's the note I made here, is that HBO always seemed to bounce back. Whether it was Don King taking Mike Tyson to Showtime, boom, the HBO would come back with De La Hoya. Then De La Hoya starts doing his own thing. They still have him. Mayweather, they're still building him into a star, along with Top Rank, obviously. Then Mayweather starts thinking, hey, I can do what I want. I'm going to retire. Boom, Manny Pacquiao comes on the scene. They turn him into a megastar. Then Pacquiao and Mayweather start aging. Boom, Canelo. They turn him into a star as well. So HBO, they knew what they were doing. And you can only do that when you have guys like Lou DiBella doing the type of scouting that he did, really understanding boxing. And then on top of that, you had people above him managing to get the big bucks and the freedom to put on a quality product for hardcore boxing fans. Again, Al Heyman, Jimmy, the book on him was that he didn't want to... Ah, shit, Jimmy left. Hopefully he'll jump back. Al Heyman... Jimmy, can you hear me? Jimmy! All right. But what I wanted to say was that, yeah, so you had that type of understanding from those executives back then with a war chest that they could play around with. Al Heyman comes on, and Thomas Hauser said years ago that according to him, Al Heyman does not like to delegate power. He wants to control everything. The only reason he has promoters on board is because he needs their promoter's license to actually put on the fights. But everything else, he wanted to do it. Which is why, it's understandable now, why he drove his own boxing organization to the ground. Because whereas DiBella and Abraham and all those guys understood boxing and they worked with each other, Al Heyman didn't. He thought he knew what was going on. Nobody could tell him otherwise. And that's where we're at with the PBC.
Well, think about it. Ward Gotti, right? I think the second one, there was no belt on the line. And I still think it's the highest rated non-title fight, or one of them in HBO history. Like millions of people turned in for those next two fights because everybody was talking about what the hell happened in that first fight. It's all over ESPN. These guys beat the shit out of each other. It was crazy. So when they made the fight right away, and millions of people tuned in for that fight, and there was no belts on. That was because people then knew, and they were working for that for years. They were supposed to fight years earlier, but because Gotti got into drugs. Oh. So it was always getting pushed off. Mickey had his hand surgery. Gotti got into drugs real bad, got out of boxing. So it was always, they always missed, and it was talking about him. So I think DiBella was trying to make that fight for at least half a decade before they finally fought. But he was always, when he finally got to that position where these guys can fight, and he was on HBO, and HBO was like, Jesus, they both got fucking, at least fucking, 5 losses or whatever, right?
More than that, yeah.
They got losses. Yeah, at the time. Yeah, exactly. Like, really? You think this is the right? Because again, there was always that college kid working there. Where they're like, really? Well, shouldn't we be undefeated fighters, championship boxing? Like, no, we're here because we're promoting boxing. This match will be crazy. That Irishman and that Italian kid will beat the dog son out of each other, and they won't quit. So, I mean, it's actually kind of savage if you think about it. Man, we can make these two kids beat each other out to death. But it's cultural in the sport of boxing how much that fight means.
And another interesting
to
point
this
about
day, at a hall, he gets crazy standing ovation. He's not even in the Hall of Fame. Half the time he gets a louder ovation than half the guys they announce who are Hall of Fame. We are with the speakers. Say, Mickey, the place goes nuts.
It's interesting because on top of that, they rebuilt Arturo Gatti after those 3 war fights. I remember he grew in popularity because of those that war trilogy. Of course. And then he went into a comeback where he beat Gracchi. What was his name? He beat an Italian guy for a vacant title, and then he beat Leo Dorin and Jesse James Leija, and he made that comeback where people actually said, hey, he might have a shot against Floyd Mayweather Jr. And again, Floyd Mayweather Jr. was a virtual nobody back then. That was his first breakthrough fight. That did about 500,000 pay-per-view buys in 2005. Now, you got to keep in mind, 500,000 pay-per-view buys, nowadays, if you make 500, you go, oh, shit, they're popping open the champagne bottles. Back then, it wasn't really that much. It was a starting point for Floyd Mayweather. But my point is, like Jimmy said, they were making investments. Every fight, there was a method to it. They were having a guy on HBO, and they were building him up for something bigger down the line as well. They were playing chess back in those days. And nowadays, I don't know what they're doing.
And to that point, too, think about it. Mickey Ward fought on ESPN more than any fighter in history.
Right.
And he was never, and he only had, a WBO maybe some at one time for a stretch. But just goes to show you, if you fight, that's the only thing what really mattered. They push boxing. Nowadays, they would never have somebody with that many losses. They would never give them the opportunity.
Exactly. Exactly, and that brings me to another point that I want to bring up here about the quality of the fighters. But we got to go to the phone lines here real quick. Let's go, fellas. Don't forget to hit the like, hit the like, hit the like. It really helps us out, and it takes less than 2 seconds. Let's go to 201.
90 seconds.
201. You're on the air. 201. What's on your mind? I can hear myself in the back.
Good evening, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, man. What's up?
Just adding to the point, like one of the things that why boxing is falling nowadays, in my opinion, is just the need of actually good commentating team, and we need a good leader. Just like back in the days, we have a lot of immersion. Well, not hater, just a truth teller. But nowadays, people call him hater for whatever reason, and like, what do you think, like, somebody like Larry Merchant would say, like, somebody to Shakur Stevenson nowadays, man?
So sorry, I didn't hear somebody who would say what about Shakur Stevenson?
Like somebody like Larry Merchant. What do you think he would say to somebody like Shakur Stevenson? Like, what do you think he would say to him?
I mean, he'd be pretty open and honest about the fight. But then again, to Tim Bradley's credit, he has been quite open himself about Shakur Stevenson, so at least he's honest about that, like Larry Merchant. But yeah, I think Larry Merchant would have said it with more wit.
Would have roasted him.
Yeah.
Would have roasted him. He roasted Mickey once hard when he
was
with that Mexican kid, remember?
This is Junior.
Go ahead, caller.
Exactly.
Now, what's up, Jimmy? This is Junior. What's going on?
Yes, what's up, Junior? No, I agree with what you just said. I said exactly. Yeah, no, I think you made an excellent point. Didn't mean to cut over you, brother. Keep going.
No, you're good. It's just the fact that, like, nowadays, like, they just want to ride, like, you're right, Didier. Timothy Bradley is kind of open, but he's only open when you feel like he, when you press him. When you see, like, a lot of people, throwing fire to him on Twitter or like any social media or to the phone or whatever. Like he started like backing down. He started being, the truth actually comes out, but you have to actually push him, and I think you kind of see that effect though, like in the commentary like nowadays. But as long as we're gonna see it now on next Shakur Stevenson fight, we're probably gonna see what he's gonna say now, and that was all, guys. Have a good night.
All right, man. Thank you for calling.
Junior, thanks for calling, buddy. I'm sorry, Mr. BDA. Junior's a good guy, man. Yeah, he's actually one of my favorite callers, man. Junior, thanks for calling, buddy.
Anytime, man. But by the way, Jimmy, probably like down the line, maybe on Saturday, because I've been hella busy. I work in a hospital. I've been like getting back to training because I've been injured like on my shoulders, and we're gonna get into like some film study into like Consenso or Shakur Stevenson and the German guy he's gonna fight. So hopefully you can join us. Hopefully.
Hold on, where is that taking place?
All right. It's in Discord. Like, it's just gonna be like.
Oh, okay. All right. Hey, maybe I'll
drop me a drop that in or request me if you're on Discord.
All right.
Are you on Discord, brother? Just drop me a line.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome.
I'm gonna send you an invite then.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for calling in, Junior, and take care, man. Take it easy out there. Call back next time.
Sorry about that, Mr. B.
All right, guys.
I mean to cut over you. I just wanted to say I don't. Oh, there we go.
That's all right.
Again.
Yeah, I think there's a delay.
Having a terrible delay.
Yeah, I know, man. It's been last episode too. It didn't used to be this way. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, shout out to Junior for calling in, and let me read a super chat here. We got about 15 minutes left. I think I covered most of what I wanted to cover so far. Shout out to Flow State for his contribution to the super chat. He says, Jimmy, does the NFL make more on subscription or ads? What does he mean by subscription, Jimmy? The NFL has the NFL has a network, right? Is he talking about that?
Well, they have like you can get like the Sunday package where you can watch games because normally it's blackouts. You'll get your local team, but that's it. I don't know the metrics, so I'd be speaking completely out of turn. I would assume that they make much more money on their network deals, their ads. I mean, they get $7 million for a 30-second ad during a Super Bowl.
Yeah, the Super Bowl, that's the holy grail of advertisement. Yeah, so they definitely need more. The advertisement, definitely, it's historically, that's where they want people watching
and
the
NFL. And they're talking about putting that behind a paywall. Did you hear about that, Mr. BD? The NFL is actually contemplating putting it behind it. It'd be ridiculous.
They've been saying that for a while now, and I don't know if that's ever going to happen. But then again, I'm not familiar with
I think smart enough people in the room are telling them not to, because just the advertisement. You're getting $7 million, right, for 30 seconds. The fuck you talking about?
Yeah. And you know what,
asinine.
Though? If you think the NFL is something, the Super Bowl is something, that World Cup of soccer, that's the rights, just the rights alone to air the World Cup. That's on another stratosphere as well. But hey, people, don't
hundreds of millions of people watch that worldwide.
Yeah, that's a world. Yeah, the Super Bowl is, it's the United States and maybe a couple of people from different places across the world. The World Cup, that's pretty much, it's 32 countries and plus.
The world.
Yeah, the world. Yeah, exactly.
It encompasses the world. And Americans, for some reason, have a real hard time absorbing that. They just NFL, man. It's like, you're like, no, dude, you just don't get it. You don't get how big soccer is worldwide.
Exactly. Now, the interesting thing about the article, I'm going to skip ahead to a couple of things, because essentially it just gets into the fall of HBO. And one of the reasons why it fell was because Lou DiBella left, Seth Abraham left, and the people that took the reins, they were good business people, they were good TV people, but they weren't boxing people. They didn't understand it half as well or as good as DiBella and the other guys. And then it mentions Al Heyman, and it talks about how the future executives made side deals with De La Hoya and Al Heyman by proxy, and that started the fall as well. There was a point in the 2010s where it doesn't matter who was there, no executive was going to be able to save HBO Boxing. It was on the chopping block because HBO at the time, they wanted to move into original programming more, Game of Thrones, that type of thing. And what else does it say? Bob Arum says it was the end of an era. It just essentially it talks about how nobody really knew what they were doing later on, and then the pay-per-view came along, and they started making exclusive fights on pay-per-view as opposed to on Championship Boxing. So a couple of factors involved there to bring down HBO. But I wanted to say something here. I want to go back to Lou DiBella's quote about how they were putting on the best product for the fans. That's something that you don't see anymore in boxing. And I wanted to show you guys something in regards to that. But real quick, let me just read another super chat here. We're almost out of time. Shout out to Flow State again for his contribution with the super chat. He says, do fights make more on one single pay-per-view or ads? Well, that's the thing. The point of the pay-per-view is that they're not really making that much money off the ads, although they do make money if they advertise beer or something. But they're making the money on people paying for the pay-per-view.
Exactly.
So again, it doesn't
matter.
Almost
no corporate backing.
Right. So it doesn't matter if a lot of people watch the pre-fight show on the internet or whatever. If they're not buying it, the people in charge, the executives at DAZN and ESPN and PBC, Amazon, whatever, they don't care. They want a return for their money for people to actually buy their product.
Imagine going to picture being an ad exec, right? And somebody comes to you, hey, I want to let's throw some money behind this fight. And he just kind of goes over, let's say Ryan Garcia versus Tank Davis. Okay, got one kid talking about how he was ass raped in the woods. And the other one looked at a pregnant woman begging for help that he just broadside and he ran from.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I don't think we're going to put too much money behind this.
There you go.
So,
and you know what?
In blockchain, it's all about the buys.
And just to illustrate about how it really does pay to have a sort of a clean image so that the corporate backers I don't know what's the word I'm looking for here. Sponsor you. Tiger Woods made more money off of advertisements than he actually did on golf. He made more money than De La Hoya, technically, I think. But if you looked at where that money came from, it came from the sponsors, whereas De La Hoya, his purses came from the boxing itself. And so when Tiger Woods got into his extramarital activities, Nike dropped him for a while. But then they were making too much money off him, and then they brought him back. But it just goes to show you that they do take a hit if the athlete is behaving in a less than Christian manner. But the thing that I wanted
they were running away from Tiger Woods, not just Nike. Like everybody, all his big people took off from him.
But then he got them back, though. That's the thing, because money talks.
His plated. No, in his play, he played himself back into that position, and they couldn't ignore him.
There you go. Exactly. That's absolutely right there, Jimmy. Real quick, I gotta close this. Yeah, okay, so I think this is gonna be a good point here to end this on, because DiBella, like I said, he mentioned how what made HBO Boxing great was that they had people who knew boxing, so they knew how to make the good fights, and they knew how to make the big fights, which is what people wanted. You don't see that nowadays all that much. I'd be interested to know who the people controlling DAZN and ESPN are, because it seems like they don't really know. And we've talked about it before. We've complained about how, why did for a long time, why were they trying to push Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson so much? It's like they were praying to have the next Floyd Mayweather, and they were doing so by sacrificing guys like Navarrete and other guys who are entertaining and who bring it.
Yep.
But they try to really lather up and shove these fighters down our throats. And I just want to show you something, Jimmy. I don't know if you can. I'm sharing the screen here. This is a video that I saw today on Twitter, and it's from Shakur Stevenson sparring. It's a slow-mo clip. Look at how he reacts to getting hit. Okay. Hold on. I'm putting up on the screen here. All right, you should be able to see it now on the screen.
Yep. Oh, he yells at the dude.
Yeah, I apologize for the fact that it's in super slow motion, but that's the way it is on Twitter. So he actually almost turns his back. The guy hits him with a body shot, and then he just walks away, and they stop the sparring. Jimmy, some people were saying, "Oh, it's because his headgear got out of place." First of all, I don't see that. I see him getting hit with a wallop, and him doing that classic Shakur Stevenson face that he always makes when he gets hit, which is like, "You're actually hitting me? You're supposed to."
Yeah,
you're not supposed
listen. This not open for debate, Mr. BDA. Anybody who's questioning whether this kid does not like to get hit, the fact that after his fight he could not, he was obsessed looking at the jumbo screen of that mouse he had under his eye. Man, look at that. Look at that. It's like, brother, you should have that on your face fucking half the year. Just some sparring, catching elbows and headbutts. Like, he was fascinated by that. But nobody reacts. He fought that kid, his last fight, when he was jumping around the ring like he had kangaroo legs, going back, fucking jumping 3 feet in the air to try not to get hit. Tells you he doesn't like to get hit. People don't fight that way who like to get hit. And anybody says nobody likes to get hit, I know for a personal fact that's bullshit. Plenty of fighters actually enjoy it. You know what I mean? Mickey did. That he couldn't get into a fight until he got really cracked. That's when it focused them. You know, it's like it's in a primeval thing. It focuses you. Okay, now I'm fighting for my life. This dude's trying to kill me. We'll wake you up and get you fucking focused quick. Some guys need that shit. And then some guys, and Mickey too, he just, like, I asked him, I told you the story, and, Jesus, Mickey, you ever get used to this? Like, my eye was all swelled up and shit, and he was just so nonchalant. He goes, I don't know, I kind of like it. And that's when I knew, I'm like, okay, I don't ever want to like it to that degree. Like, he didn't even think nothing about when he said it. So it's true. This kid is a super fast twitch athlete who is able to use his length and crazy hand speed and athleticism to dominate boxing. Now at the pro level, without the headgear and guys you can crack, we've seen how he reacts to people who have an ability to punch him hard. How are things going to change? You think he's going to stay in the pocket against somebody like that who can crack? Everything's going to have to change for that kid.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or they're just going to fucking, carefully match him against guys he has length on. Because as long as he has the length, that's key to his success.
And that's really what I wanted to get at. And look, as far as it pertains to the discussion we've been having about the rise and fall of HBO and what can that tell us about the future of boxing in regards to the broadcasting, the reason why I bring up Shakur Stevenson is, look, I'm not saying he, just because of this clip, that means he's a bad fighter, he's got shit technique, whatever. That's not what I'm saying, because obviously he's got a lot of physical talent and he's got good boxing instincts. But what I'm saying is, if you're looking at this from the point of view of a fan, And then you're looking at it from the point of view of executives via the fans. No, few people are going to want to see this guy in a main event. You cannot try to push this guy as some sort of main event guy and as some sort of Floyd Mayweather pay-per-view stalwart when he doesn't sell, he doesn't dazzle the fans. And you look at it here, he gets hit and he does that. Look at it, he looks like a wounded animal, like a confused puppy that you just slapped in the face. Well, I've never slapped a puppy in the face, by the way, but that's how I imagine an animal would look like if it was suddenly struck by its loving master. Look, and then he turns his back and actually halts. There's no timeouts in sparring unless the guy's seriously hurt. And again, I know it's subjective. Maybe he felt that his headgear was out of place, but he's actually looking like he got hit so hard. I think what it is he's so fast, he's unaccustomed to getting hit. So when he gets hit with walls like that, he just doesn't react well. I remember when Valdez was hitting him with straight rights. Valdez caught him with plenty of straight rights. He would do that phase where he would scrunch his eyes and open his mouth like, ooh, like, ooh, that hurt. As if someone is pricking his balls with an ice pick, which I don't know what that feels like, but I imagine that's how it would. Jimmy, this dude, that's what I'm trying to get at is, why do people, Eddie Hearn recently said, people, Top Rank doesn't know how to promote Shakur Stevenson. I want, and I'm thinking, does he really want to go down that route, Jimmy? Of having this guy as a main event fighter when he just doesn't deliver?
No, well, he had his opportunity, so he was full of shit on that one, and I got nothing against Eddie Hearn, you know what I mean? But he's full of shit. He had every opportunity. He was just a free agent. Did you sign him? Remember? After that, he come out with Ward on one side, fucking, Crawford on the other, but you notice those guys weren't there to walk out of the ring with them because they were fucking humiliated. He embarrassed them. And that's Ward. It's hard to do. But with Crawford, everybody says, Crawford gets hit too much. Crawford gets hit because he's a fighter in his heart, in his bones. He's a fighter. He doesn't mind getting hit. Okay, you hit me, I'm going to hit you. It's always the guys, boxing's hit, don't get hit. But then, turn around and say, well, fucking, then say, well, who cares that Wilder couldn't box? He had that one hit quitter. Like, dude, make up your mind.
Exactly.
Boxing's about grit. What's the best boxing match? Listen, people only do watch things because inherently you see yourself like, what would be in boxing, right? It's the best story, the Rocky story, the guy who's taken a fucking beating, right? And comes back and stops the dude or just puts it all on the line. It's that, you know what I mean? Like the intestinal fortitude gives you goosebumps. You're watching like, God damn, like, that's what it is. So when you get a guy like Shakur Stevenson, like that's an affront to the sport. That's an embarrassment to the guys who've bled in the ring. When you're jumping back like that because you're so afraid to get hit, that's in you. That's who you are as a person. How the fuck is he going to change that? And Eddie Hearn had every opportunity to sign him, and he didn't. And I was a big Shakur person. Because again, what did I always say though? I won't know. The jury's out until I see that kid get chin checked. And the fact that he did everything he could not to get chin checked, not to take a big shot. He doesn't even want to know if he can take it.
Exactly. And we said something similar before the Frank Martin Tank Davis fight where we said, look, the guy's fast. He's got physical talent. But under the bright lights, what's going to happen? And then sure enough, we found out. Because you can only find out, like you said, once they're in the ring. And let me read you a quote here from that article there about the rise and fall of HBO. This was from Thomas Hauser. He says, I got a letter years ago from a reader. This reader wrote me about how he worked in marketing. And marketing people understood that they could sell a perfume that smells bad. They could sell a shirt that looks ugly. It's all marketing. One thing they could not sell was boring sports. Because people know when they're being entertained. HBO Boxing stopped being as entertaining as it had been before. When that happened, when talking about Al Heyman, got preference at HBO, other promoters began to take their fighters elsewhere. I can't give you a year when things fell apart, he says, because everything is compressed in my mind. But the decline began when Seth and Lou left. So that's when I read that. That's Shakur Stevenson. Why do they insist on putting Shakur Stevenson in as a main event where he doesn't sell, especially in today's world where the economy is people are struggling. A lot of people are struggling. They're not gonna want to renew their ESPN subscription if it's a lot of guys like Shakur Stevenson, for example. In other words, Shakur Stevenson is not going to be the difference maker for them to go, hey, I'm going to sign to ESPN because they got Shakur Stevenson. Nah. Even the boxing hipsters, Jimmy, after Stevens' desultory performance against De Los Santos, they couldn't defend it. They said that this was horrible. Now, again, Shakur Stevenson, I think he's going to try to press Hartunian in his next fight. And I think he's going to stop him because Hartunian is sort of soft to the body. But then what's going to happen when he fights another top-level guy and not some prospect in Hartunian?
Crack.
Exactly.
Yeah, who can crack. That's we're going to see the same thing because it's going to come out of him. And just to put a cap on with the whole era with Al Heyman, Al Heyman left such a bad taste in the mouth of HBO executives that at the Daniel Jacobs, that was the first PBC crossover fight, Jacobs Triple G on HBO. But what was a demand? First off, Al Heyman could not be a part of any. Nobody at HBO would speak to him, so they only dealt with Jacobs' management team, not Heyman, and they could not thank Al Heyman. Did you notice there was no Mr. Watson in the ring? I don't believe he was in the ring. There was no thanking Al Heyman. I like to thank Al Heyman. Back then, like it is today, it was a prerequisite, but no longer. They did not want his name even mentioned. That's because he just destroyed the sport. He just destroyed HBO Boxing. And Peter Nelson knew it, but Peter Nelson was a fucking clown too, the president there. But
yeah, Bob Arum says
that he was persona non grata at HBO Boxing.
Bob Arum says that about Peter Nelson. He says Peter Nelson, and even Ross Greenberg, or I think it was DiBella, says, I don't know why he would take that job, because they say that Peter Nelson must have known that his job was going to be to usher boxing out of HBO. So, he just, I don't know, he became the scapegoat for that, because a lot of people blame him for the downfall of boxing, but like the other executives point out, nobody was going to be able to save it at that point. It was done. It was a done deal.
Al Heyman destroyed it wholeheartedly. I mean, Bob Arum called him the cancer. He's a cancer to the sport of boxing. He's a lawyer. He understands how important words are and what he says. You know what I mean? That wasn't said. He didn't take that lightly. I mean, could you think of more of a detrimental, just brutal thing to say about somebody? You're a cancer to something.
Yeah, and
Arum knew.
And like I said, with ESPN now, they got Murataya, who kind of looked bad in his last fight, that's for sure. But most of the time, he looks scintillating. Promote that guy instead of spending so much money on Shakur Stevenson, who, by the way, Shakur Stevenson feels that he's worth more than $3 million per fight. That's what he thinks, because he thinks he's so good and because he's got a silver medal on his head that merits more than $3 million. So again, spoiled fighters. So promote Murataya instead of that guy. And in the heavyweight division, for example, they keep trying to pump Jared Anderson there into the mix. He fails to deliver too. Instead of promoting that guy, why don't they promote Torres more? But see where I'm going with this? I don't know if it's Top Rank's what's his name? Bob Arum's is a stepson or son-in-law.
ESPN, dude. It's a woke network.
It's gotta be, man.
Of course. I mean, identity politics, bro. I mean, Star Wars now the only white guy was in it was the guy they talked into killing himself 5 minutes into it. And the rest of fucking black lesbian witch cult. Right. It's laughable. It's all identity politics, diversity, DEI. And so, of course, they're promoting, it goes down to fucking the thing. It's going to be black, Hispanic, and white's going to be last. You don't see really ESPN looking to push too many white fighters. And look at just how the European guys get treated. They all get ganked in their fucking decisions. Triple G, fucking Lomachenko gets robbed.
Kovalev.
It's Kovalev gets robbed, exactly. So it's right, true. Man. I mean, Triple G had a fight on HBO for next to free just to get him on.
Yeah, I remember that by in 2012, I believe. But listen, we ran out of time, but I think we did cover a lot. And again, it's just that I put the link to the article. I'm going to post it again. It's a 3-part series about the rise and fall of HBO Boxing, and it really gives you an insight as to why boxing can grow as a sport and why it can fail. And one of the big things is when you have people that know what they're doing, and then on top of that, they keep the fighters in rein. Right now, you got guys like I said, Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, who doesn't want to fight his mandatories and wants to take a year off after a loss. So it's boxing. It's definitely in a special place, but like other callers pointed out, there's a lot of good. The 2023 was a fantastic year. 2024 has been just as good, if not better. We have the Saudis coming in. We have the internet so that more people can actually watch. I mean, listen, back in the day, if I missed a fight, and I'm talking in the 90s, if I missed a fight, good luck trying to find it again. Unless you knew somebody had recorded it. Now with YouTube, with torrents, with streaming
You'd have
websites.
to buy them.
Was that?
People who had videos, sold them online. That's what I used to have to do. You'd have to buy them.
Exactly. Yeah. But so it was hard to find, is what I'm saying. So the internet has
in
been
the
a
back of
godsend.
boxing magazines, people had videos. I used to sell videos. Remember them?
really?
And all the back of KO magazine, people sold videos for all the fights.
Yeah, there you go. It was hard to find certain fights. So there is. We're not here. I just want to make it clear that I'm not complaining. I always look at the silver lining. And like I said, there's a lot of good nowadays with boxing, but there's always that risk of people that get into the sport of boxing because they think it's easy. They see that there's only about 3 or 4 promotional entities, and they go, "Hey, I can get in there and really, take over." And they end up sometimes they end up ruining themselves, or they end up ruining a lot of the sport. And Al Heyman, he put on some good fights, but for every good fight he put on, there were 5 fights that you went, why did we have to watch that? I forgot to mention in the article, Thomas Hauser says that the decline of HBO really started as well when, like I said, De La Hoya had Al Heyman in his ear, and they were trying to push guys like Chris Arreola, Andre Berto, and Robert Guerrero as their mainstays. Like, it's interesting. In the 90s, they had, in the 80s, they had Leonard, they had Hagler, they had Leonard Hagler, they had Hearns, they had Duran, they had Larry Holmes. 90s, they had De La Hoya, they had Trinidad, they had Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, Roy Jones. They were trying to push, then in the 2010s, they were trying to push Guerrero, Berto, and Chris Arreola. Whereas after Heyman finally left HBO with De La Hoya, they started putting in guys like Bradley, Golovkin. It's just they Canelo. They found the guys that should have actually been there. Those were the guys that should have been on HBO, not Guerrero and then Paul Williams. Okay, Paul Williams brought it, but there were some fights from Paul Williams because he was aligned with Al Heyman too that shouldn't have been on HBO. So I just wanted to clarify that too as well. That was one of the beginning of the ends.
When HBO went under, I remember tweeting out, "This is going to have a detrimental effect on the sport of boxing that's going to last for decades."
Right. I
knew it was gonna.
You called it, man. But at least, like I said, we got the zone. They're really investing in a lot of sports, and including boxing. Eddie Hearn seems to be aligned with them. So is Golden Boy. Top Rank, they're too competent to fail. They're probably going to find themselves somewhere else after they're done with ESPN. And then you got the Saudis coming in with that Saudis checkbook. So again, I'm still skeptical about what the Saudis are going to do. But for the moment, hey, they're bringing together promoters because money talks. So we'll see what happens there with those guys. So, yeah, listen, I got to go. The Mexico game started. So shout out to everybody that donated with the super chat, everybody that called in, everybody that listened to the show, Jimmy and Chief. Shout out to you guys for joining us. Really appreciate it. It was a fun show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. Thank you for being on. And it was really good to sort of switch it up a little bit and talk more about what makes boxing great and how it can be greater.
I really enjoyed this show. I really did. It was fresh. I like it. Just we talked about things other than the same old topics.
Exactly. Well, we'll be back to the same old topics on Friday, I suspect.
Right.
Open lines. But anyway, yeah. Again,
well,
thanks a lot.
We have the throwback. We got to give him his props, man. Fucking go Bam! Seriously, kid's a throwback to the old guys.
Yeah.
Kid, all he wants is the best.
Yeah, and hopefully
he's the only one doing it like that in American. So good on him.
And hopefully Estrada can turn back the clock because, again, a 2-year layoff or almost 2-year layoff, it's going to be difficult. But if anybody can reverse the clock a little bit, then it should be Estrada. So we'll see what happens.
I hope Bam stops him. Sorry for the Estrada fans. I hope Bam stops him. I think it'll really blow up his career even more. I think you know what I mean, to take notice.
All right. Well, we'll talk more about that on Friday then. But Jimmy, thanks
Mr.
again.
BDA, you have a great night.
You too, man. Thanks again for being on. Really appreciate it as always. And like I said, shout out to everybody that donated the super chat, everybody that tuned in, everybody that called in, of course, as well. Shout out to Joker's Wild, Slide Encounter, the Chitlin Distributor, Virtuoso. Shout out to Virtuoso for gifting people those 5 memberships. Baron Evola, J Colt, Nightmurph. Shout out to Nightmurph. Shout out to Rapax Trucking Company. Good to see him on board as well. Uncle Burnt Apostrophe, Vince Vegas. Mr. Pelavacas, the Quags, shout out to the Quags, another of the initiated, Super Sardonic, Skull K25, Achilles, the Funktopus, Alonso, and if I forget anybody, it's because we gotta go. Shout out to you fellas, thank you for joining us, really appreciate it. Catch you on the next one.
Let me tell you why. It's gonna be alright, Nicky. Go ahead, shoot. Let's just get a little fucking mad.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, because you got nothing. You don't got a thing. Yeah, because you got nothing. Lobito! Got nothing.
I want to get out. I want to get out of this rat hole. I want to get online. I need
BDA Boxing.